Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Brittany Gargle was born to a happy and loving family on August 31st, 1996. Although it was a blended family, they were tightly knotted together by love and friendship. Brittany was born to her mother, Suzanne, and stepfather, Everett, joining three stepsisters, Courtney, Tristan, and Victoria, who would prove to be her best friends as she grew up. She was described by her stepsisters as one of the bravest, most outspoken and adventurous girls they had ever known. This was something they had admired so greatly about her. As a teenager, she had her sights set on securing her future in hospitality. She landed her first job at the age of 16 and was working as hard as she could, driven to have made it in the world by the time she became an adult. Her family described her as a go-getter, someone that wasn't afraid to go after what she wanted and work hard towards pursuing her goals. By the time she was 18, everyone around her knew that she would flourish and succeed with ease. Brittany grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. This is a hugely popular city full of arts and culture. But despite the hustle and bustle of the big city, Saskatoon is also home to an abundance of natural scenery, making it one of those best of both worlds locations. Even though many, possibly most, find it a delightful place to live, it comes with its downfalls. Saskatoon's crime rate is extremely high, sadly, with domestic violence and femicide being a pretty alarming concern for many who reside there. In March 2015, Brittany was 18 years old with a hard-working life. She was balancing 2 jobs and school, living up to the fearless perseverance that she was known for by her family. Despite the fact that she kept herself busy, she was practical enough to know that she was only young for so long. Brittany knew she had to enjoy life while she could. This is why she still made spending time with friends a priority, taking the time out of her busy schedule to spend quality time with the people she loved. Because of this fact, on March the 24th, Brittany had sectioned off some time to spend with her best friend, Cheyenne Rose Antoine. They had planned to let loose and go bar hopping together, drinking and dancing away the woes of the week. When the two got together, they first went to a party. There they hung out with some friends and took a selfie together. After this, the two started their night out on the town. They began the second part of their night at the Manchester Brew Club. They drank and danced there for a few hours. Then they decided to leave and pay a visit to the Colonial Pub and Grill. Whilst they were there, Cheyenne noticed Brittany talking to a mysterious man. Thinking not too much of it, she continued her night of partying. But she kept an eye on Brittany and the man as they got to know each other more. After a while, Brittany decided she wanted to hang out one-on-one with the man. This left Cheyenne to be dropped off at a nearby senior living facility. She stayed at this facility with her uncle. There she used Facebook as a way to get a hold of Brittany and ensure that she was safe. She wrote, "Where are you? Haven't heard from you. Hope you made it home safe." Thinking little of Brittany's lack of response, she spent the remainder of the night and following morning with her uncle. On the morning of March the 25th, a man was driving down the road when he saw a strange bundle lying to the side. Thinking it was a mannequin or something else strange, he pulled over to inspect it. As he got closer, he realized that this was in fact a real female body, one that was no longer living. Shocked and disgusted, the man scrambled to call the police about his discovery. When officers arrived, they were greeted by the cold and bruised body. It lay without shoes and with a black belt laying beside it. Because of the bruising on her neck, the officers could only assume that she had passed from strangulation, and the autopsy indeed would later confirm it.
She loved life, she loved living it, she had such a kind heart, she gave everything she could to make other people happy. She did what she could do to make me happy. She wanted to finish school and open her own business and do everything she could to be successful. And then life was taken from her and she's no longer with us, but when I'm here, I can still feel her presence.
Luckily for the investigators, they were able to use 2 tattoos on the woman to try and identify her. They released photos of the tattoos to the public in an attempt to find her loved ones. It wasn't long before Cheyenne called the station. She identified the tattoos as belonging to her best friend, Brittany Gargle. Brittany's parents followed closely behind. Sadly, after seeing photos of their daughter's tattoos on the television, this is how they found out about their beloved Brittany's passing. Cheyenne detailed to the police what had happened the night before. This included the mysterious man that Brittany left with that night. Although it was beneficial that the investigators had gotten a lead so early, it would be very hard to identify a man that they had very little physical description of and no name. The investigators decided that the best way to track down this man was to follow in the footsteps of what Cheyenne and Brittany did that night, starting with CCTV footage. They started with the pub where Brittany and the man had met, hoping they could at least get video evidence of the man talking with her, and even further, hoping that they could follow where they went when they left the Colonial Pub and Grill. They obtained the CCTV footage and combed through it, but what they found was not what they expected. They saw nothing. There was absolutely no video evidence of the 2 girls ever arriving at the pub, meaning there was no footage of them leaving either. The truth was, the 2 girls had never been there on the night of Brittany's passing. Something here was clearly off. Cheyenne had some questions to answer. They turned back to the best friend, now knowing that her version of events was a lie. Officers pulled CCTV footage from the senior living facility where her uncle lived. They discovered that the timestamp for her arrival was much later than what she had told the police. But instead of confronting Cheyenne with this information, police decided to speak with her uncle instead. This is where the case would take a complete unexpected turn. Cheyenne's uncle would tell the investigators his niece and Brittany were together up until Cheyenne arrived at the senior living facility. He said they were staying in a motel with 2 men, and there a fight broke out over illicit substances. This was all according to Cheyenne's account to her uncle. She said she had left to calm down in the bathroom, and when she returned, Brittany was lifeless on the floor. The 2 men had then forced Cheyenne to help them cover up what they had done, threatening her life if she were to try and run away from the situation. This conversation with Cheyenne's uncle gave them a much deeper insight into the kind of person that Brittany's best friend was. She had a difficult home life and struggled with substance use. She proved this fact to be true when she was arrested for multiple substance-related charges. The police took their opportunity to question Cheyenne again, confronting her with both her uncle's account and the CCTV footage. This time they spoke to a very different Cheyenne. She was quiet, uncooperative, and unwilling to answer any of their questions. With the hope of a confession gone out the window, the police had to pursue other avenues of figuring out what exactly had happened to Brittany on that fateful night. 6 months passed and the police had no leads regarding to the motel or the 2 men. Morale and hope was low. Until, that is, Brittany's parents received some shocking pieces of information. Another witness to the events of that night had come forward and spoken with Brittany's family. They said that Cheyenne had come to see her at around 4 AM on the early morning of Brittany's passing. According to the witness, Cheyenne was drunk and distraught, confessing to the true story of what had happened to Brittany on that night. Brittany and Cheyenne had gotten into an argument. This was rumoured to be over illicit substances. This caused Cheyenne to completely lose her temper. She hit Brittany over the head and then proceeded to throttle her, leaving Brittany completely unresponsive. During this conversation, the woman had apparently looked at Cheyenne's car from a distance, and there she had seen a woman slumped over inside. The woman, who we can assume to have been Brittany, looked badly beaten. Whilst this evidence was a huge help to the case, they needed a lot more than the woman's statements. They still didn't have a reliable timeline of events, or any type of evidence that would connect Cheyenne to the crime against her best friend. A shocking 2 years would come and go without any new leads. The police knew that if they tried to charge Cheyenne now, she would most likely walk free. Police then conducted numerous interviews. They carried out numerous tests and followed almost fruitless leads, desperately scraping together any piece of evidence that they could find. Finally, a real, true break in the case: Cheyenne's Facebook page. On March the 25th, 2015, Cheyenne had posted the selfie they'd taken together on that night. A comment from Cheyenne was written on it 6 months later. She detailed how much she missed Brittany and wished that she could see her again. But the comment wasn't the source of the investigators' shock. It was the outfit that Cheyenne had been wearing that night. The outfit included a black belt looped around her waist. The officers immediately recalled the one thing that had been found alongside Brittany's body. Laid on the side of the road on that early morning was a black belt. The belt had tested positive for both Cheyenne and Brittany's DNA, the police now realizing that they had in their possession the weapon that Cheyenne used to end Brittany's life. This was the evidence they needed to finally try Cheyenne for the murder of her best friend. They arrested Cheyenne in 2017 and questioned her again about Brittany's passing, now presenting this new evidence. It would take weeks of interrogations to finally break Cheyenne from the solemn, silent position that she took. She finally confessed to her crimes, although very loosely. She admitted to ending Brittany's life, but due to the substances and alcohol involved, she had no recollection of it. But police didn't buy this story, as Cheyenne wouldn't have gone to such lengths to cover up a crime if she didn't even remember committing it. She had messaged Brittany after she knew that she was no longer alive. She had posted about it on Facebook and had given the police 2 false stories. It was up to the police to prove that everything Cheyenne was saying was a lie. When the trial began, her defense was insistent on the fact that she had no recollection of ending Brittany's life. In addition to that, the defense asserted that Cheyenne must have lost control, and this was due to her history of maltreatment from her parents, saying that she was taking out her rage on Brittany. The defense wasn't trying to argue for Cheyenne's innocence. They were arguing that she didn't plan it beforehand or intend to do it at all. She simply committed the unspeakable crime in a fit of blinding rage. Their story was that when Cheyenne looped the belt around Brittany's neck, she had always intended for Brittany to live through this ordeal. This was something that the prosecution lacked the evidence to dispute. Even though the prosecution wanted to prove that Cheyenne had full knowledge of her actions, they still didn't have a solid timeline or any method of establishing a motive. They couldn't prove that the best friend had meant to hurt Brittany before the argument, and in the end, the 2 parties reached a plea deal. An agreement on what Cheyenne had done and how she would be sentenced. Cheyenne Antoine pled guilty to manslaughter. In simple terms, she admitted to accidentally ending Brittany's life.
Today we learned some details that will help with closure regarding this incident. Brittany was a wonderful young person that didn't deserve this, and we truly deeply miss her every day.
She was sentenced to just 7 years in prison. She will be released in 2024. No matter what Cheyenne intended, she took a brave, strong and adventurous life from her loving family. A pain that we can imagine 7 years will never even begin to cover. This is the true story of Ellie Gould, a lover of animals, a driven young woman, someone with a bright future within her grasp. But when young love appeared in her life, things would start to change. An unimaginable chain of events began to unravel. So what would become of Ellie? Ellie Gould was born on the 6th of February 2002. Her family lived in the Wiltshire town of Carn, nestled in the North Wessex Downs, an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's a small community and a very close one. It was the ideal place to bring up children, and the Goulds were, to all intents and purposes, a picture-perfect family. Ellie was known for her bubbly and smiley personality. She had a passion for horse riding and animals, and had ambitions to join the mounted police. When she started 6th form at the Harden School in Chippenham, she quickly made a new set of friends. Ellie was likeable and put a lot into her friendships. The group became close quickly, and as the school year progressed, it also got bigger with more boys joining the group. They'd spend every minute that they could together, bonding over teenage things. They were just normal, happy, carefree teenagers living life to the fullest. Ellie and her friends had their whole lives ahead of them. In January 2019, Ellie's mum received the news that every parent dreads. Ellie had a boyfriend. After school one day, Ellie had told her mum that a boy had asked her out. She was giggly and shy, almost embarrassed. "What's he called?" her mum questioned. He was Tom Griffiths, a boy from Derry Hill. He was in her friend's group at school and was a bright, talented sportsman. Ellie and Tom had an on-again, off-again thing in lower school, but they made it official when they entered 6th form. This, in Ellie's mum's eyes, was a surprising choice. Ellie was just about to start her exams. She didn't think she was interested in a boyfriend right now. Ellie's dad wasn't overly keen on Tom because he didn't say much, but the parents assumed this aspect of his character was just down to his age. They believed the relationship would just fizzle out, and it seemed they were right. Priorities quickly shifted for Ellie, and boyfriend Tom became a less important part of her life. She decided to focus more on revision, exams, and her girlfriends. By May, she was ready to end the relationship. It was a normal Thursday evening when she ended things. Afterwards, she texted her friends with relief that she finally felt free again. But little did anyone know, her freedom would be short-lived. On the 3rd of May 2019, it was a regular Friday morning in Wiltshire. Carol, Ellie's mum, was at work. She'd left 17-year-old Ellie eating her cereal at home when she left. Ellie would have normally been in school on a Friday morning, but she didn't have any lessons that day, so she was staying at home to revise. Her friend planned to pick her up at around 12 o'clock. She would drive both of them to school for their history class. Carol got a phone call from her husband Matt around lunchtime. This wasn't anything out of the ordinary, he often phoned for a chat. But this call was different. Father Matt was hysterical. He said, "Carrie, you need to come home. You need to come home. Ellie's had an accident. She's had an accident. Just drive carefully. Ellie's had an accident." Detective Superintendent Jim Taylor was a senior investigating officer on the case. Father Matt had returned home at around 3 o'clock. He had then walked into the kitchen and found Ellie. He thought she had had an accident and immediately sought help from a neighbour. They called the ambulance and the police, who were faced with a horrific scene. 17-year-old Ellie had passed away. She was found face down in a pool of her own vital fluids. There she lay, face down, with her right arm across her body, holding onto the handle of a sharp implement. To the naked eye, it looked as though she'd inflicted her wounds on herself. When you consider the nature of her injuries, the amount of blood, and Ellie's family circumstances, after all, she was incredibly loved and happy. The police believed there was no way that this injury was self-inflicted. Ellie's distraught parents believed their daughter's tragic death was just a mishap. Had she maybe put the knife in a toaster and electrocuted herself and fallen backwards? Had she fallen off the cabinet whilst holding the sharp implement? While Ellie's parents were struggling to come to terms with her passing, the police were trying to piece together their own version of the story. A neighbour had seen someone call at the address earlier in the day, and whilst they didn't see their face, they did give a description. They were male with a slim build. The search for the mystery visitor was on. It's uncommon for a homicide to occur inside someone's home. This suggests the perpetrator was likely familiar with the victim. The police began to try and connect the dots in Ellie's friend group. Who, if anyone, would want to hurt her? Ellie's friend was questioned about the day that she was supposed to pick her friend up and take her to the history class. And although she was nervous about being questioned by the police, she did her best to answer their questions. She'd received a text from Ellie shortly before she was due to pick her up. She said that she didn't need a lift anymore. The detective's questioning soon turned from Ellie to Tom, the now ex-boyfriend. The friend said, "I was screenshotting messages that Tom had sent, and then I looked on Snap Maps to see where he was. Just coincidentally, I thought I'll have a look on Snap Maps, and it so happened to be that he was still in the area." She further explained, I thought, oh gosh, Tom's gone over to convince her that they should be together. She thought that Ellie, being Ellie, will have been blunt with him and said, look Tom, it's not happening. We're not getting back together. You need to get over it. The friend also revealed that Tom had messaged everyone on the day of the murder. He sent pictures to a group chat where he shared a photo of himself with scratches on his neck. He said that he had been hurting himself, going through a tough time. His friends offered support and urged him to talk to them whenever he felt overwhelmed. For the police, Ellie's ex-boyfriend Tom wasn't just a person of interest. He was the person of interest. When officers caught up with him, he had injuries to his neck which looked fresh. He also wasn't acting normally. But then again, he was a teenager who just found out that his ex-girlfriend, whom he still loved, was dead. It didn't necessarily mean that he was guilty, but he was suspicious. Tom also matched the description that the neighbour had given. He was then deemed as a suspect and arrested. At the police station, Tom continued to deny any involvement in Ellie's death. He explained that on the day of Ellie's death, he'd been dropped off at school by his mum. He wasn't feeling well, so he then returned home. He had spoken to a neighbour about his stress, ill relatives, and about doing harm to himself, and the neighbour then took him back to school. He again became very upset and asked to speak to the school nurse. He once again explained that he was doing physical harm to himself. They then called his mother. She came to pick him up from school and then took him back home. But the evidence the police were gathering was beginning to cast doubt on Tom's version of events. When they analysed his phone, his story just wasn't adding up. At around 10:50 AM, his phone disconnected from the family router, and it didn't then reconnect until an hour later. His location services were activated on his phone, and they could see that at 10:53 AM, he arrived at Ellie's house. He didn't leave again until 11:51 AM. He'd spent almost exactly an hour inside. CCTV footage from a bus company also had dashcam footage of his silver Ford Fiesta. This wasn't enough to charge him in connection with Ellie's death, but it was enough to show that he was lying about something. After he returned home, there was an 18-minute gap where he dropped off the router again. This indicated that he'd left his home once again for a short time, a 9-minute walk away from his home address. Search teams were deployed and quickly found what they were looking for. The search teams found a black bin liner. Inside, there were blood-stained tea cloths, napkins, and towels. They also searched Tom's home address. Here they found red vital fluid on a pair of his work trainers. When sent to the laboratory, all these items came back as a DNA match for Ellie. Tom had been caught red-handed. Armed with the damning forensic evidence, police charged 17-year-old Thomas Griffiths with Ellie Gould's murder. They had carefully pieced together what had happened that day. On the 3rd of May 2019, Tom was dropped off at school by his mother. After emailing his teachers to tell them he was feeling unwell, he walked to the bus station where he caught a bus back home. His mum had also returned home briefly, forcing Tom to hide in the wardrobe of his bedroom. He didn't want her to know that he was absent from school. When his mother left, he took the keys to the family car and drove to Ellie's house. Following an argument, Tom attempted to throttle Ellie. He then used a sharp implement he had taken from the family kitchen and jabbed her in the neck 13 times. Tom had spent an hour at the house attempting to clean up the crime scene. He washed his trainers in the kitchen sink and cleaned the knife using an apron, before then placing it in Ellie's hand. He used her finger to unlock her phone, posing as her. He then sent a text message to her friend telling her not to pick her up. He went home to change, put his clothes in the washing machine, and then dumped the bag of evidence in a local woodland. A neighbour saw him returning from the woodlands and drove him back to the school. There he was collected by his mum after speaking to the nurse. During his hearing in August, Tom pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder. However, in his defense case statement, he gave a new version of events for the day that she passed. Tom said that he drove the car to Ellie's house and they intended to study. After studying for a while, they began to argue about family members, and at that point, Tom claimed to have suffered from amnesia. He said he remembered throttling Ellie, but he then lost his memory. He came to, but Ellie was lying next to him in a pool of her own blood. This story seemed unlikely. Blind rage can lead to forgetting, but in this case, Tom had used Ellie's fingerprint to send a final text message. This wasn't blind rage, and it certainly wasn't amnesia. It was an excuse for a cold and calculated plan. Tom pleaded guilty to Ellie's murder, meaning that the case would not go to trial. On the 8th of November 2019 at the Bristol Crown Court, Ellie's family came face to face with the boy who had gone from boyfriend to killer. He kept his head down and wouldn't look up at anyone. And although he was within weeks of being an adult, he was sentenced as a child because he had no previous convictions. He was sentenced to life, but with a tariff of just 12.5 years. A lenient sentence that devastated Ellie's family, friends, and the community. This is the true story of Louise Smith, a young woman that was entering the adult world, and that hadn't had the easiest start in life. In tough times, it can be hard to know who to trust, so when Louise left the house one day, but never came back, where would the police even begin to look? What had become of Louise? Louise Smith was pretty much like any other 16-year-old girl. She loved animals and being outdoors. She was studying to become a veterinarian. She was a smiley, bubbly person who loved her family, but she also had her struggles. Louise was battling with depression and anxiety. Social workers had monitored Louise for some time, and they had put her on a child in need plan. This was due to the constant risk of domestic maltreatment and neglect. She was bubbly, but she was also impressionable and vulnerable. She often had arguments with her mother over her desire for more independence. After falling out with her mother, she had been living with her cousin, also known as CJ, and her husband Shane in the Lee Park area of Havant. They were younger than her mum, both 29 years old, but they were old enough to be responsible for her, and initially it was a good fit. She called them her aunt and uncle, and they got on well. For a 16-year-old that desperately wanted independence, this might just be the perfect solution. But unfortunately, the perfect solution didn't stay perfect for long. On May the 7th, 2020, Louise had had enough. The United Kingdom was under lockdown due to the pandemic, so Louise was unable to live the independent lifestyle that she so desired. She texted her friends saying that she needed to leave her aunt and uncle's home. She described the couple as vile and explained that they treated her like a child. She also alleged that Shane had acted inappropriately. She felt he was attempting to flirt with her on several occasions. This made her uncomfortable and she didn't know how to handle him. She recorded Shane on her mobile phone as evidence to send to her friends. In the video, he can be seen tickling her feet. So enough was enough and Louise decided yet again to leave her home. Still not on talking terms with her mum, she turned to a friend, Samantha Bird. She explained the situation to Samantha. She then offered Louise a place to stay and even said that she would allow her boyfriend Bradley to live with her too. This proposition seemed appealing to both Louise and Bradley, and it was almost a done deal. When CJ learned of this, she reached out to Louise to make amends. She was incredibly persistent. CJ attempted to make contact with Louise over 50 times and eventually she gave in. Louise, CJ and Shane managed to talk it through. They resolved the situation and Louise decided to stay. With everything sorted, they decided to celebrate with a drink. Louise and Shane went to the local shops. Shane bought the alcohol and the two walked back to the house together. Louise began drinking. She wasn't in the best mindset. She desperately wanted a friend to stay with her that night. So eventually her boyfriend Bradley went to the flat. He couldn't stay over, but he chatted with Louise, CJ and Shane for a little while. There was some discussions about Louise disliking the way Shane was speaking to her, saying he was actually flirting. It was relatively light-hearted and Bradley wasn't concerned when he decided to leave. He made plans to meet Louise the next day at around 3 p.m. Hopefully the hangover wouldn't be too bad. Later that night she messaged some of her friends, saying that she was so drunk that she'd passed out. She also contacted a mental health helpline. Louise told the person that she was struggling with the lockdown and that she was thinking of doing harm to herself. At some point after 3 a.m, she finally managed to fall asleep. The next day, Friday the 8th of May 2020, was VE Day in the UK. It was also in the middle of a nationwide lockdown. There wasn't much going on for anyone. When 3 p.m. came around, Bradley made his way over to CJ and Shane's house to meet Louise. When he arrived, he was greeted by CJ. CJ told him that Louise had gone out for the day, but had not yet returned. Bradley pulled out his mobile phone and made several attempts to contact Louise, but he had no luck. At around 4 p.m, Shane returned home. Bradley then asked him if he had seen Louise anywhere on his way. He had seen Louise only a few hours before. Shane explained that he had walked with Louise to a park before leaving her to go and visit his mother. He said that she had gone to see some of her friends, but that he hadn't heard or seen from her since. Bradley began to worry. Over the next few hours, he tried relentlessly to get in touch with her. However, she was unable to be contacted. Everyone close to her knew of her current mental state. They knew that she had been struggling with her mental health. They were growing worried about what she may have done. By that point, Louise was past her 6 p.m. curfew that was imposed by her aunt. At 6:32 p.m, CJ made a call to the emergency services to report Louise as missing. A search was soon underway to find her. As a 16-year-old girl, the police knew that the best way to find her would be through her mobile phone. Louise's phone records told a somber story. The last contact Louise had made was with a friend via Snapchat at around 12:50 p.m. The phone calls that Bradley made were picked up by multiple phone masts. These covered the Havant Thicket area. However, at around 4 p.m, her iPhone died and disconnected from the mobile phone network. They knew that her phone hadn't left the area, but it was also unusual for Louise to let the battery completely die. The police turned to those who had seen her last. Both Shane and CJ were questioned and asked where they had last seen Louise, but strangely, Shane changed the story that he had told CJ and Bradley. Instead of telling them he'd walked Louise to the park, he told the police that he walked to Tesco with Louise on the 8th of May, before she then left to see some friends. This was a small change, but one that the police picked up on. If one small detail can change, maybe the entire story will follow suit. The police also learned that Louise was thinking of moving out. and that CJ was keen to make her stay. They also discovered that Shane had been flirting and acting inappropriately towards Louise. These facts, along with Shane's story that didn't add up, made the police incredibly suspicious of the couple. As the search continued, police revisited the house several times. Each time, Shane Mays barely had a word to say to the police officers. He told them that he and Louise got on well. He also made another comment, strangely asking police if he could lock Louise in a bedroom if she returned. On another occasion, he told officers that he had searched a number of places for the teenager. He also claimed on one instance that after he had walked to Tesco with Louise, he then watched her walk away up near Billy Lawn Avenue. He walked police along the route he claimed to have walked. He and the police were all picked up on CCTV doing this. But on footage from the 8th of May, he was not seen on a CCTV with Louise walking this same route. This raised the question for the police. Why would he lie? What was he hiding? On the 15th of May 2020, the couple were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping. Louise's family and friends remained hopeful that she would return, but unfortunately, this wasn't the case. On the 21st of May 2020 at 11:45 a.m., a body was found by search teams about 40 meters off the track in the woods. The body had been torched. It was barely recognizable as a result of the injuries sustained. Injuries which included repeated heavy blows to the head. The body was confirmed to be Louise. Upon discovery, several sticks were found piled on top of Louise's body. This was said to have been done in an attempt to fuel a fire. A lighter was also found at the scene. In total, there were 19 separate injuries to Louise. A pathologist was unable to conclude which of them was fatal. This was no longer a missing person or even a kidnap. This was murder. The police theorized that Shane had lured Louise into the wooded area, and he had then attempted to force himself on her. But when this didn't work and Louise began to scream, he attacked her to stop her from making any further noise. He then defiled her body and started the fire. With no evidence linking CJ to the crime, she was released. Her hearing was held on July the 15th at Winchester Crown Court. Shane pleaded not guilty to the murder of Louise at his trial, which was set after his plea. However, on the first day of the trial on November the 17th, 2020, Shane admitted to killing her, but claimed it was an accident, and he pleaded guilty to manslaughter instead of murder. The prosecution team gave a detailed account of Louise's injuries. They also showed CCTV footage of Shane leaving the crime scene. DNA evidence belonging to Shane was found on a stick which he had inserted into Louise. On the stand, Shane claimed that Louise had asked him to go there with her for a conversation, and that they made their way into the wooded area where they began to argue. He alleges she picked up a big stick and hit him on the side. He said this hurt, so he grabbed it off of her and threw it on the floor. He then struck her in the face, repeatedly. Shane explains that she fell to the ground on the second punch, and that he then couldn't stop himself. When she was on the ground, punches continued to rain down. He couldn't say how many times he struck her, but he said he heard her bones crack. He says that when he walked away, he could still hear her moaning, claiming she was still alive. Shane denied that he intended to end Louise. He tried to push the idea that he'd simply lost control. When questioned as to why he created a hole in Louise's stomach, and then inserted a stick inside, and then set her on fire, he claimed that he did no such thing. His defense claimed that somebody else must have come along and done these things to the body. When asked why he lied to the police, Shane claimed that he had not intended to purposely lie about what had happened. He believed at the time that what he was saying was true, and that he simply didn't remember correctly. Shane has an IQ of 63. He's in the 0.1 bottom percentile for memory range. This mounted part of his defense. Just a quick note from me, his IQ is less than that of a dolphin, but on we go. Thankfully, the jury saw through this defense. The prosecution team highlighted the savagery of the attack and told the jury, even when he saw the blood and heard the cracks, he carried on. The shattering of her facial bones, the total separation of the jawbone from her facial skull. Shane Mays was found guilty of murder. He gave little reaction as he found out the news. In a victim statement, Louise's mother described her daughter as strong-willed, happy and smiley, who had the whole world to look forward to. When speaking to Shane in court, she said, "You killed her in such a traumatic way, and what you did afterwards is beyond words. You damaged her so badly I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye, to hold her hand, or even kiss her." Shane was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. In January of 2021, a solicitor referred the sentence to the Crown Court of Appeals. This solicitor considered the sentence to be far too low. Sadly, this appeal was rejected. Some people and some cases are like a strange, slow-motion car crash. Unsure how those involved can't see that disaster is already in motion. This is very much one of those cases. The true story of Lucy McHugh. Lucy McHugh was a normal 12-year-old girl from Southampton, England. She lived with her mum Stacey and her mum's partner Richard. She was bright, bubbly, intelligent and always eager to learn. Her family called her Brains because she was so switched on. Lucy, who went to Redbridge Community School, loved playing with the babies in her family. She had her heart set on becoming a pro bono lawyer in the US, aiming to help people who could not afford to help themselves. Her school teacher said that at one stage she wanted to be a mechanic, then a fashion designer, but in the end she decided she wanted to study law. No one had any doubt in their mind that she would achieve it, because she was just Lucy. In May 2017, everything changed for Lucy. Stepdad Richard's friend, Stephen, was facing the prospect of being made homeless. So Richard did what any good friend may do and invited Stephen to live with them, Stacey and Lucy, in Southampton. Stacey put in a good word at the care home where she worked and got Stephen a job there. It was an opportunity for him to have a fresh start and really turn his life around. Up until this point, life had been kind of hard for Stephen. He had spent a large part of his childhood in care, and at the age of 14, he was sentenced to 2 years in a Young Offenders Institute. During his time in a Young Offenders Institute for his crime, Stephen, along with 2 other inmates, barricaded themselves in the servery before causing thousands of pounds worth of damage and attacking staff with sharp kitchen implements. In adulthood, Stephen struggled to find a purpose. He became obsessed with reptiles and tattoos. He owned several snakes, and while he was not a tattoo artist, he would provide a tattooing service to anyone looking for a cut-price tattoo. Stephen was covered in artwork himself. A slight or skinny man, he made up for his lack of stature with his arguably impressive array of artwork, including a tattoo of the word freedom across his forehead. This made him a curiosity to 12-year-old Lucy. Stephen was 23, a grown man with an impressive collection of reptiles. It's easy to see how he may have captured the attention of someone her age. Lucy quickly developed a crush on Stephen, a crush that Stephen disturbingly did little to diminish. Instead of rebuffing her, keeping his distance, or indeed moving out, Stephen encouraged Lucy and sadly exploited her interest in him. To him, she was available in the same house, even in the bedroom opposite his, and he took full criminal, sick advantage. Notes written by Lucy told the full story of their relationship. Heartfelt and explicit, the notes give details of the loss of her virginity to Stephen in May 2017. The very same month he moved into her house. The notes described the repeated intercourse between them which followed, and the emotions which Lucy experienced throughout. Obviously, we know that this wasn't a relationship, it was simply In one note, Lucy tells Nicholson that whatever this is between them has to end, but it did not. Unbeknownst to her parents, Lucy was used by Stephen from the moment he set foot in the family home. Her stepfather's best friend was grooming her from the very moment he was able to get close enough. Over the course of 14 months, Lucy became a shadow of her former self. In Lucy's young and immature eyes, she was in a relationship. Stephen was her boyfriend, and she made no secret of this to her friends. Hearing reports from other pupils, Lucy's teachers were naturally concerned. Although Lucy denied any intimate relationship to her teachers, they immediately did the right thing, referring their concerns to the local multi-agency safeguarding hub, first of all in 2017, and then again after Lucy had moved to a different school in 2018. On both occasions, a team had investigated and found nothing to be concerned about. No action was taken. By May 2018, Lucy told her cousin that her relationship with Stephen had now become a terrible burden. He was violent and she was scared of him. Lucy and Stephen were often arguing in the house, and while Lucy's mother and stepfather were aware of the fights, they put it down to teenage angst. The pair just didn't get on, is what they told themselves. Given her age, it was normal to be withdrawn or secretive, right? In this case, wrong. Eventually, the arguments were too hard to ignore, and Lucy's stepfather asked Stephen Nicholson to leave. Something wasn't right, and he knew it. On the day Stephen moved out, Lucy told Richard that he had something she needed to tell him and her mother later that night. But Stacey didn't return home until Lucy had gone to sleep. The moment had passed. A couple of days after moving out, Stephen left work early. He claimed to be suffering from sickness and diarrhea. Working in a care home that looked after the elderly, Stephen knew that he would not be allowed back to work until 48 hours after the last symptoms had presented themselves. But Stephen wasn't actually ill. He was simply buying himself time. On Wednesday the 25th of July 2018, Lucy left her house at 9 a.m. A CCTV camera at the local Tesco shows Lucy walking across the car park at 9:30 a.m, just half an hour after she left home in a white top and camouflage leggings. She had no phone, but she can be seen walking purposefully, glancing down at her watch. She didn't want to be late to wherever it was she was going. A woman walking her dog in the sports centre grounds around 10 a.m. recalled seeing a girl matching Lucy's description heading towards the top of the cricket pitch. But Lucy never made it home. When she wasn't home later that evening, her parents began to worry. They phoned the police, who launched a missing persons investigation. And the next morning, Stephen comforted Stacey and Richard. They were obviously growing increasingly concerned for their missing daughter. Stephen sent a text message to Stacey saying, "I hope they find her safe. Police are good at their job and they will find her soon. Keep your chin up and stay positive." But the police would not find Lucy safe and well. Just hours later, her body was discovered. Lucy describes the harrowing moment she was informed of her daughter's death. "I felt the blood turn to ice inside my veins. The room began to spin, and I had the sudden urge to vomit. I dashed from the room, feeling like my whole world was about to implode. I couldn't breathe." On the 26th of July 2018, a dog walker found Lucy's body at the Southampton Outdoor Sports Centre. She had been attacked with a sharp implement until she was no longer breathing. The police didn't wait around. Stephen was arrested on suspicion of her murder the day after the body had been found. His arrest sparked one of the biggest evidence searches in UK criminal history. They trawled through thousands of hours of CCTV footage in the local area, all to piece together his movements in the day before. On Tuesday the 24th of July, he phoned in sick to work. He told the office that he had sickness and diarrhea. He knew that it was company policy for carers to remain off for 48 hours after the last symptoms had passed. But Nicholson was not sick, at least not in that meaning of the word. That afternoon, he cycled up to the flat of an elderly man whom he knew in Curzon Court, a home situated right beside the sports centre where Lucy was found. He was there for around 3 hours. There, he ordered a pair of new trainers for delivery first thing the next morning. That evening, he messaged Lucy on Facebook Messenger, but he deleted the messages soon after reading them. We'll never find out what those final messages read. At 8:15 a.m. on Wednesday, Nicholson cycled from his mother's home to the flat at Curzon Court, arriving at 8:30 a.m. At around 9 a.m, he took a trip to the nearby Tesco Express. He then met Lucy at the sports centre. CCTV unfortunately fell short here, but the police strongly suspected that Nicholson took her into the woods to the side of the top cricket pitch. Lucy told Stephen that she was pregnant and the baby was his. We can assume this was the given reason for the meeting. And there, deep in the foliage off of the beaten path, he attacked her. She was found with 27 markings to her body, most to the face and neck. The pathologist noticed that Lucy had some stab wounds on her arms and wrists. These could have been defensive wounds, as if she was desperately trying to protect herself. There was one unusual incised wound right across her wrist, as if the murderer had initially tried to make it look as if Lucy had done this to herself. Damage to the carotid artery led to sudden high-pressure blood loss, then unconsciousness, and very soon after that, her demise. After he had ended her, Nicholson returned to the flat at Curzon Court before cycling home. During questioning, Stephen admitted to detectives that he had corresponded with Lucy via Facebook Messenger. When police attempted to gain access to his Facebook account, it became apparent that he changed the passwords in the day prior to his arrest. He refused to hand over his new password. Officers were now at a loss. There was no DNA evidence at this point, and they could only hold him for 96 hours without charging him. They turned to a piece of legislation often used when dealing with terrorists, Section 53 of the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, or RIPA as it's commonly known. Stephen was bailed in relation to Lucy's murder, but charged again under RIPA for failing to hand over his Facebook password. He then went to trial at Southampton Crown Court, where he was sentenced to 14 months in prison for not handing over his password. This sentence bought police the time they needed to continue their investigation. Stephen had been very careful to cover his tracks. The police knew that they had their man, but there was no physical evidence or DNA linking him to the scene. The police turned to a cloud data analyst to study the location of Stephen's phone on the morning of Lucy's death. They didn't have the physical phone. This too had strangely disappeared before his arrest, but they didn't need it. They were able to pull location data from the cloud. This investigation showed Stephen had been in the vicinity where Lucy's body had been discovered. This was obviously exactly what they expected. It also showed that he deviated from the most direct route back to his house, stopping off at Tanner's Brook on his way home. Police immediately launched a fingertip search of the area. There they found a bag of partially burnt clothing, including a blood-soaked hoodie. It contained Stephen's and Lucy's DNA. They knew they finally had the evidence to charge their man. On the 18th of July 2019, Stephen was found guilty of Lucy's murder as well as 3 counts of violating her. The judge didn't hold back as she delivered the sentence. She was a 13-year-old child. Your selfishness and savagery have blighted her family's lives forever. The sentence is one of life in prison. Stephen was sentenced to life imprisonment and told he would serve a minimum of 33 years behind bars. He was also given 17-year concurrent prison sentences for each of the violation charges that he faced. It's unlikely he will ever see freedom again. In life, sometimes we can do all the right things, but we're not rewarded for our actions, and sadly, sometimes we're even punished. It is hard to conjure up reasons for bad things happening to good people, and the actions of an evil few leave us scratching our heads, asking the question, why? This is the true story of Sasha Marsden. Sasha Marsden was a 16-year-old student seeking a career in childcare at the Fylde College. It takes a very specific kind of person to be drawn towards caring for children, one that is nurturing, patient, kind and empathetic. These are all words that can be easily used to describe Sasha. Sasha came from a loving family in Blackpool. She was born to Jane and Gary Marsden alongside sisters Gemma and Katie. Sasha was described as an attractive, bright young woman, someone with the prospects of a promising future ahead of her. Her older sister Gemma described her as cheeky and caring, saying that Sasha was attached to her all the time as Gemma's little sister. Unfortunately though, Sasha's past had changed her significantly. After experiencing an assault when she was just 14, the trauma she endured had caused her to struggle greatly as she aged. She frequently ran away and struggled in school, fighting to deal with the pain that she had endured, and the lack of accountability that her attacker had received. Despite these struggles, Sasha truly wanted to make a difference in the world, showing her true colours on her quest to become a caregiver and educator. This is why she enrolled in the Fylde College to make a better life for herself, refusing to let her assailant have any more power over her life. For those of you outside of the UK, Blackpool is a seaside town that acts as a famous vacation spot in Lancashire, England. It is the stag and hen party capital of the UK. In summer, it thrives on tourism. People love to visit its beautiful beaches, the tower, the zoo and the gardens, and it's even been voted as the UK's favourite seaside resort. But unfortunately, Blackpool is not only home to sunshine and smiles. In the winter, it cuts a starker shape. Sasha Marsden was hard at work on her college studies, managing her time enough to where she began looking for a job to make some extra money. Unfortunately for her, it was wintertime in a town that thrived on the summer sun. Businesses were slowing down and were reluctant to hire. Luckily though, she had met a man through a mutual friend, and he gave her the prospect of a job. The man was named David Minto. A 23-year-old barman and groundskeeper, Minto worked for the Grafton House Hotel. The hotel was a quaint getaway owned by Minto's girlfriend and her mother. Upon meeting with Sasha, he decided she would be perfect for the job. She could work for their hotel as a cleaner during the winter months. This is because his girlfriend Rachel would be away working at another job. Minto messaged her through Facebook. He was offering her the position and invited her to come over the following day so he could show her the ropes. Sasha excitedly agreed to the employment opportunity. It didn't seem too strange to Sasha when David Minto replied, "Will it just be you because I get a bit nervous around new people?" She calmed Minto's mind and made plans to visit the hotel the following day. David and Sasha had agreed that her first official day of work would be January the 31st. So on that day in 2013, Sasha's father, Gary, drove her to a shoe store near the Grafton House Hotel. Sasha told him that she would send him a message when she was ready to be picked up. Gary returned home to his wife and the family continued their day as normal. He was, however, prepared to pick up Sasha when they received her message. But by the time 8 PM rolled around, her parents became extremely worried. They had called her and texted her to check on her status status but had heard nothing back. Instead of panicking, they decided to call Sasha's boyfriend, Danny. It was possible that he had gone to pick her up instead, but Danny hadn't seen or heard from her either. We can only imagine this causing an ominous feeling in the pit of their stomachs. Sasha's parents decided that they needed to find the hotel that Sasha was working at. Fortunately, boyfriend Danny knew Sasha's Facebook password, and this was a method of communication between Sasha and David Minto, the man who was now her boss. They quickly found the name of the hotel and hopped in the car to pay a visit. Upon arriving at the hotel, they walked inside to find David Minto at the front desk. Knowing that he was the man that hired Sasha, they asked him if Sasha was ready to come home yet. But to their surprise, David explained that Sasha had already gone home for the night. This was a great cause for concern. Sasha had no way of getting home without either her parents or Danny giving her a lift. Even though she had disappeared before in the past, things seemed different now. They thought that part of her life was over. Hours would go by without any news, and when 11 PM rolled around, Jane and Gary Marsden knew that something had to be wrong. It was time to report Sasha missing to the police. The investigators that spoke with Sasha's parents were diligent in taking down Sasha's description and last known whereabouts. When they had received the relevant information, including the fact that Sasha was working at the Grafton House Hotel, the investigators couldn't ignore the possible connection that Sasha could have to a case they'd received just hours earlier. A neighbour of the hotel had discovered a fire in the alleyway behind the Grafton House Hotel. This was after it caused his smoke alarms to go off. The neighbourhood recalled a man and woman coming out of the hotel to view the commotion, with the man saying that it was a mannequin that had been set ablaze. This man was David Minto and the woman was his girlfriend, Rachel Butterworth. During the neighbours' attempt to put out the fire, it had become increasingly clear that this was not a plastic person, but a real one. They were wrapped in rubbish bags, carpeting scraps, and bedding. There was no way to visually identify the body due to the state that it was found in. Police investigators had to find another way. Using Sasha's toothbrush, they were able to match her DNA to that of the body that had been found in the alleyway just hours before. She had been terribly assaulted, receiving 58 wounds to her neck and head made with a sharp implement. The only man that had any sort of connection to Sasha was David Minto, the man that had hired her. Because of this, David and girlfriend Rachel were both arrested for Sasha's attack. Before they questioned the two suspects, police had done a thorough investigation of the hotel and the alleyway. They had found a huge amount of Sasha's DNA, namely in the form of blood. Vital fluids were in the alleyway, hotel halls and bathtub. DNA had also been found on a knife inside the hotel, one that would later be determined to be the sharp implement that was used in Sasha's attack. In addition to this, investigators found Sasha's clothes, purse and phone inside the hotel. Upon questioning, Rachel denied knowing anything about the occurrences from that night. She said she had arrived at the hotel at around 9 PM, smelling a strong odour of bleach in the air. David said that he had cut himself and got it on the carpet. He had then used bleach to clean it efficiently. Rachel had no clue that David was talking to Sasha, or that he had hired her or invited her to the hotel that day. In fact, David had no authority to employ anyone or pay them, having absolutely no say in the business or any access to the bank account. The police believed Rachel's story. They released her from custody and turned their focus to David Minto. The evidence against David was overwhelming, but his confession would seal it all in place. Despite the cards that were stacked against him, David aggressively denied any involvement in Sasha's passing. His story went as follows. Sasha had arrived at the hotel to complete her first day of cleaning. While she was there, she made aggressive, intimate advances towards him. This almost forced him into an intimately charged situation. He finally succumbed to her advances, and then he had consensual relations on the floor of one of the hotel rooms. He said that she suffered a nosebleed during the event. This is how he explained the red fluid they had found inside of the hotel. He stuck to the notion that this was the last time that he saw her, and at that time she was alive and well. Even though the investigators couldn't gain a confession, they still felt confident enough to charge David Minto with ferociously ending Sasha's life. Police described it as one of the most horrendous scenes they have ever investigated. As they prepared for the trial, the evidence against David only continued to accumulate. CCTV footage had shown Sasha entering the hotel along with David Minto, but she was never seen leaving. And even if she had left, why would she leave her clothes, her phone and her purse behind? In addition, the investigators had gone through Sasha's phone. There they found 2 drafted but unsent text messages. The first was drafted at 4:58 and said, "Pick me up at Madame Tussauds. This is a wax figure museum nearby to the hotel." This message was sent to her boyfriend's father. This was unusual as Sasha was aware of the fact that he was currently out of town. The second, drafted at 4:59, was for Danny, which read, "I love you, tell Dad to pick me up from Madame Tussauds." This was equally as strange as there was no previous text messages between the couple. In fact, they almost never communicated through text messages at all. It was quickly deduced that Sasha did not write these messages at all. They had been written by her attacker. Not only was the hotel slow in the winter months, it was completely closed down for renovations. This meant that the fact that David even hired Sasha at all without the owner's knowledge was completely nonsensical and at the very least suspicious. On July the 15th, 2013, David Minto's trial began. The prosecution aggressively asserted their version of events. When Sasha rejected Minto's advances, he flew into a frenzy rage. He defiled Sasha's body and then started the fire. As for the defense, David's story had changed since his discussion with the police. His new story asserted that although they did have consensual relations at the hotel that night, that she had in fact passed away inside the hotel. After their intimate encounter in the hotel room, he said they had gone their separate ways. Sasha was to go home and David was to finish cleaning up. A short time later, David had discovered Sasha's body in a hotel corridor, saying he found her maimed and defiled from an attack by an anonymous intruder. And then, in a state of shock and confusion, he moved the body to the back alleyway behind the hotel. He did this because the sight of her made him queasy. The defense asserted that the real attacker was still out there roaming the streets, whilst the prosecution was pursuing an innocent bystander. The prosecution ignored these accusations, confidently presenting the overwhelming evidence against Minto, and hoping that this was enough. 11 days later, it was time for the jury to deliberate. It only took 3 hours for the members of the jury to arrive at a unanimous decision. They found David Minto guilty for everything he had done to Sasha Marsden. He was sentenced to a minimum of 35 years in prison, and the judge had plenty of choice words for him, saying that his deeds were ferocious and sustained, and that there was no sense of humanity within him. Sasha's family is doing everything in their power to ensure that David Minto never sees the light of day again. Sasha's sister Katie is ready to fight as hard as she can to make sure that Minto stays in prison forever, saying, "He will be 57 when he gets out. We believe he will do this to someone again. He's got no remorse and was not sorry in court. He took selfies on his phone while Sasha's body was there." This is the true story of Alexis Sharkey, an incredibly driven, popular and intelligent young influencer. Someone that had a life full of money, beaches and good times ahead of her. So when she mysteriously stopped replying to messages, and witness stories weren't quite adding up, where would her friends, family and the police even begin to look? What had become of Alexis? Alexis Robinault was born in Warren, Pennsylvania on January the 25th, 1994. Even as a child, she could light up a room with her smile. When she laughed, she had a way of making everyone feel like they were in on the joke. Despite growing up in a small town, everyone knew that Alexis was always destined for bigger things. She wanted to travel, see the world, and experience new things. She always talked about getting out of that small town. After graduating from high school, Alexis went on to study biology and psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. She was considering going to medical school, but she was apprehensive. By going to medical school, starting her career and planting her roots in one area, she worried she could be settling down for life. After graduating, she decided to spend the next few years checking things off of her bucket list. She carefully curated her Instagram feed to showcase her adventures. She gained a lot of attention and fell into becoming an influencer. She moved to Texas and worked as a bartender at Twin Peaks. This was to support herself while she traveled and explored new places. Here she met her future husband, Tom Sharkey. 23 years her senior, the two had immediate chemistry. Tom worked as a consultant in the oil field, and he would often travel around the country for work. But whenever he was in Odessa, he would stop into the Twin Peaks to see Alexis. He seemed like a nice guy, and the two hit it off. Alexis and Tom got married in 2019 and eventually moved to Houston, Texas. Tom had friends in the area, but Alexis hardly knew anyone. She worked from home as an influencer, so she downloaded Bumble as a way to meet new friends. Through the app, she met Tanya Ricardo and they hit it off immediately. Tanya introduced Alexis to her group of friends, and within just a couple of weeks, Alexis had formed another close-knit circle of friends. She took her friendship seriously and always made it a point to spend time with people outside of her relationships. Thanksgiving 2020 was no different. Alexis spent Thanksgiving with Tanya and her family away from Tom. They played board games and ate all day with everyone in high spirits. Then at around midnight, another friend picked up Alexis and they went out to a bar. They partied the night or the morning away until 3 a.m. Alexis then returned to Tanya's house to pick up her car and drive back to her apartment. The next day was Black Friday, and as an influencer, Alexis was in for a busy day. It was one of the biggest sales days of the year, and therefore it was a big money-making opportunity for her. When Alexis hadn't answered Tanya's calls that morning, that's what she put it down to. She thought she was busy creating content and making sales, but by midday, her social media was still dark, with her not posting to her feed or story at all. This wasn't like her on a normal day, let alone on one of the busiest days of the year. She also wasn't responding to messages in the group chat. This wasn't like Alexis at all. Her life was social media, so her phone was her life. Her friends were starting to worry, but these worries were appeased when Alexis texted the group chat at 5:30 p.m. She ignored the previous messages that had been sent all day and asked if anyone wanted to go out that night. It was the holiday, so no one could really meet up, but the group agreed to hang out the next day and have a chilled girls' night in. Little did they know that this text would be the last time they would hear from Alexis. When Alexis stopped responding to their messages, her friends immediately began to worry, and so too did Tom, Alexis' husband. Tom sent a text message to one of Alexis's friend's boyfriends, a man named John. He asked him if he had heard from her. Tom claimed that he and Alexis had gotten into a big argument. He said it resulted in Alexis hopping over the patio fence, jumping into a waiting car, and driving off with the occupants. John immediately called Tom, but something felt off. When explaining what had happened, Tom went over everything he had done that day, detailing things that didn't really matter instead of focusing on finding Alexis. The call lasted for 45 minutes, and immediately after, John told his girlfriend that something was very wrong. Tom went on to call other friends of Alexis, telling them different stories about what had happened that night. To some, he claimed that Alexis and he didn't get into a fight. Rather, she had just got mad at him and stormed off out of the house, barefoot. She then jumped into a small black car and drove off. But when asked how she would go off into the middle of the night without shoes, he then said it was possible that she was wearing shoes, but he just didn't notice. He claimed that Alexis had also left without her phone. But when he spoke to other people, he told them that he had tracked her using the Find My Phone application. By the next morning, he had called and spoken with multiple people, including Alexis's mum. He told very differing stories about what had happened. As Alexis's friends got up, they became increasingly worried. Tanya went over to Tom and Alexis' apartment, but found that no one was there. Together with Alexis' mum, she filed a police report. Her friends immediately jumped into action, creating posters, hashtags, and Instagram posts, spreading awareness about Alexis being missing. On November the 28th at around 8:30 AM, something caught the eye of a sanitation worker employed by the city. It looked like a mannequin abandoned at the side of the road, but something didn't sit right with him. He phoned his boss for help, saying that he wasn't sure what he was looking at. In reality, he was looking at the body of Alexis Sharkey. Her body was completely clean, as if she'd been ended coming out of the shower or bath, and she was placed on the side of the road, posed in a degrading manner. Whoever took the life of Alexis wanted to treat her like garbage, like an object. They removed all clothes and left her in a very public road, just 3 miles from her apartment. She was there to be seen by as many people as possible, maybe people that she knew. This was no accident. This was personal. Despite the fact that her body had no visible injuries, her family and friends were certain that someone had done this to her. It was just a feeling, but it was correct. On January the 19th, 2021, over a month since Alexis passed, it was revealed that an autopsy ruled Alexis' cause of death was strangulation. Her passing was ruled as a homicide. It was also publicised that Tom was listed as Alexis' next of kin. He was the only person who her body could be released to, but he had left her body in the morgue for 2 months and never bothered to claim it. Just a note from me, I really hate this. Leaving someone alone, cold and dark, even though it's just the physical form and not necessarily the person, it just really hits me. These aren't nice places. After Alexis was found, Tom had agreed with her mother that they should have a memorial service in Pennsylvania with her family. He said he would get the body and pay for a burial. That is, until he stopped speaking to the family, full stop. Tom claimed that he felt disrespected by them. In response, he flat out refused to pick up Alexis's remains. This left the family powerless and unable to lay their beloved Alexis to rest. As the police delved deeper into Alexis and Tom's relationship, alarm bells began to ring. The relationship wasn't as picture perfect as it first appeared. Friends told the police that after a year of marriage, Alexis had wanted to get a divorce. She opened up about how Tom had been maltreating her, how he would throttle her until she passed out whenever they fought. She claimed that this had happened multiple times over the years, and despite Tom's promises to stop, the maltreatment had only gotten worse. Just a note from me, these people will never stop and they will never change. Almost without fail, their behaviour will get worse and worse and more extreme until we reach a situation like this. Be careful, make a plan, and get out. Alexis also showed her friends the messages that Tom had been sending her while she was on a trip. In these messages, he had called her a derogatory term. He accused her of having affairs with other men and expressed his general hatred towards her. It was also revealed that Alexis had begun to flirt and talk with another man outside of their relationship. According to friends, Alexis had met this man whilst on a trip to Mexico. She wasn't planning on it, but they had simply hit it off. She told him that she was in the middle of a divorce. She didn't want to start anything before her marriage was ended. But he had been a friend who she went to bars with on Thanksgiving. Could this have been the catalyst for the events that led to her untimely end? Tom gave multiple interviews stating that Alexis wasn't the nice, happy person that people believed, but instead she was dealing with a lot of personal demons. He claimed that she was stressed 24/7 and hated her life. He said that he was the only person that she could be herself around. Tom said that her friends and family didn't know the real Alexis, claiming that she had carefully crafted the perfect version of herself in front of others. Tom had been asked to give a sample of his DNA to the detectives on the case in order to rule him out. He agreed that he would give a small sample at a time, but before he did, he said he needed to talk to his lawyer. Instead, he moved to Georgia. The behaviour of an innocent man, obviously. Eventually, the police were able to track him down and arrange for them to meet, only for Tom to once again leave the state. He came up with a very bizarre story later on why he essentially disappeared, and then a short time after that incident, he relocated again to Florida. Progress on the case was slow as the police continued to pursue Tom. That was until September the 29th, 2021, when Houston police got an arrest warrant signed. They finally had enough to bring him in for the murder of his wife. Because of the high-profile nature of the case, and because he had been evasive with the police throughout, they went very quietly about obtaining the arrest warrant. After determining that he was living in Florida with his daughter, they prepared to take him in. However, things wouldn't go as planned. Not by a long shot. The task force of US Marshals located Tom at the residence of his daughter in Fort Myers. They were able to make contact and establish that he was inside the residence. But when they announced their arrival, things took a turn. Tom wasn't ready to face the consequences of his actions. When he learned that law enforcement was there for him, he ran upstairs. Before police could do anything at all, he took his own life using a firearm. He passed on the scene.
I would like to emphasize that this has been a very tragic series of events for both families, the Robanals and the Sharkeys. They've been through hell, essentially, with the attention of the public on this case. I want to put out there that no one else is suspected of any involvement in the case, and no one else is under investigation in the case. We have clear evidence that Mr. Sharkey acted alone.
Because he ended himself before speaking to police, we'll never know the events that led to Alexis's passing. This case will likely be closed now that Tom Sharkey, the only suspect, is dead. Alexis deserved so much more out of life, and Tom died as a coward, refusing to accept any responsibility. Mother Stacy has a different view. Loss of life is never good, but I do feel like, in a way, he did serve himself justice. A funny, excitable and outgoing 9-year-old girl. Someone that hadn't yet experienced much of what the world had to offer. And sadly, she never would. When a friend lured her into the woods one day, promising to show her something new and exciting, why did only one of them walk back out? What would become of Elizabeth? Elizabeth Alton was born on December the 15th, 1999. She was the baby of the family, the youngest of her two siblings, Anthony and Stephanie. She was the apple of her mother Patty's eye. The family lived in St. Martins, Missouri, a small town with just over 1,000 people. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone loved Elizabeth. She loved all things theatre and performing, and at just 9 years old had been cast in a big school play. She was excited and was throwing herself into it wholeheartedly. She practiced her lines every day with anyone that would read with her. She would even practice her songs as she walked around town. She really did have her whole life ahead of her. October the 21st, 2009 was a typical Wednesday. Elizabeth and her siblings were back from school and dinner was in the oven. There was chatter and laughter and no sign of anything untoward about the evening. It was just a normal Wednesday. Just after 5 p.m. there was a knock at the door. Mother Patty answered. She opened the door to 6-year-old Emma, one of Elizabeth's friends. She asked if Elizabeth could come out and play with her. Mother Patty said no, it was a school night and dinner was almost ready. But the girls were relentless with their persuasions. They pleaded, they begged, and they jumped up and down. Patty knew she didn't stand a chance. Patty told Elizabeth she had 1 hour and no more. She wanted her home by 6:15 p.m. The girls ran off happily and Patty went back to making dinner. 6:15 p.m. came and went, but Elizabeth hadn't returned. Friend Emma lived just 4 houses away and she was conscientious. She didn't push boundaries. When Elizabeth still hadn't come home by 6:30 p.m, Patty started to worry. Patty called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then rang Emma's grandmother Karen, who Emma and her siblings lived with. Karen said she hadn't seen Elizabeth either. In fact, she had no idea that Emma had even knocked at her door that afternoon at all. The sun was setting and there was no way that her Elizabeth would be out voluntarily. She was terrified of the dark. By 7 p.m, police officers were at Patty's house. The police started at Emma's house. Karen and Gary, Emma's grandparents, were distraught, but they didn't have any information. They maintained that Elizabeth had never been there. All they could do was join the search.
The Cole County Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, and even the FBI are desperately trying to find 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton.
Well, I think that the woods possibility is, the kids in this area play in the woods, in the farm areas back there.
More than 200 volunteers, including military, housewives, public servants, and construction workers, left their jobs to join in the search.
Contacted my supervisor, asked him if we were going to assist in any way, and he said he was going to ask for some volunteers, so...
Emma said they had been walking through the woodland near their houses. They had been darting in and out of the neighbouring lawns and backyards. She said that an hour later, Elizabeth set off home just as she was instructed to do. Emma said she watched her friend walk off, and that was the last time that she had seen her. Officers couldn't see any evidence that pointed towards foul play. They were more concerned that she'd gotten lost in the woods, an easy thing to do. By 10 p.m, almost a third of the town was out and looking, but the search party eventually had to slow down and stop for the night because of how dark it had gotten. As soon as the sun rose, they were out again in full force. A few hours later, with concern continuing to mount, the FBI was called in to help and they moved quickly to bring Elizabeth home. The search team deployed dive teams, helicopters, and sniffer dogs. All the known offenders in the area were interviewed. The FBI also started looking at Elizabeth's phone activity. She had received a call that afternoon from someone called Alyssa. 6-year-old friend Emma then asked to speak to the police again. She had a new story, but she was scared to tell detectives. She said that her half-sister had been the one to get her to knock on Elizabeth's door that afternoon. Her half-sister was 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante. Emma said that when the two were outside playing together, Alyssa came and joined them and encouraged Emma to leave them alone. Elizabeth said she had to head home and started to walk off. This timed perfectly with the call that came from Alyssa. Emma walked back to her house and stayed outside playing alone. This left Elizabeth and Alyssa out together and alone. If what Emma was saying was true, she hadn't been the last person to see Elizabeth that day. As far as they now knew, it was actually Alyssa. Meanwhile, a search party in the woods made a strange discovery. A group of volunteers had stumbled upon a huge hole that had been dug up and then covered back over. They alerted the police right away, but strangely there was nothing under the soil. The hole was empty and there was no sign of Elizabeth or anything belonging to her in that area. But detectives had seen a hole like this before. In fact, they discovered more than one. When detectives had been at the Bustamante house talking to Emma, they had noticed several holes in the garden that looked similar in size and shape to this one. With all signs pointing towards a Bustamante house, a warrant was issued to search the home. Everything seemed normal and in order until they entered Alyssa's room. It painted a very troubling and chilling picture. It was in disarray. Everything was everywhere. There was writing all over the walls, one of them reading, "It was written in blood. It was written in blood." Cards from her father, who was in prison, were scattered around the room. Detectives then found Alyssa's diary. One entry read, "If I don't talk about it, I bottle it up, and when I explode, someone's going to die." They also noticed a paragraph that was scribbled over in pen. Fortunately though, investigators were able to uncover some of the original text. To do this, they simply shone a light at it from behind. Two words stood out: slit and throat. Born in 1994, Alyssa came from a troubled and very broken family. Both of her parents had substance addictions, her father was in and out of prison, and her mother would often leave the home while she spiraled downwards. Eventually, Alyssa and her siblings went to live with her grandparents, Karen and Gary. The couple soon gained full custody of the children. Karen adored Alyssa, and although the children had had a tough life, she did her best to raise them well and be a constant and supportive presence in their lives. As she entered her teenage years, Alyssa started causing harm to herself. She was admitted into a psychiatric hospital. This was after she took an overdose and began to mark words into her arms. Doctors that assessed her described her as being violent and angry. She was diagnosed with severe depression and was prescribed antidepressants. When she was released, things only began to get worse and more concerning. On her various social media platforms, she changed her list of hobbies to killing people and cutting. She often told friends and her boyfriend she wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. She also said that she had a dream of burning down a house with a family still inside it. Alyssa was brought in for a formal interview alongside her grandmother and a juvenile officer. Alyssa started off by recounting her day. She said she had come back from school at around 3:30 p.m. She had then gone for a walk in the forest at around 4:30 to 5 p.m. By this point, detectives knew that Alyssa had actually skipped lessons that day. So pretty much straight away, she was already trapping herself in lies. She said she was supposed to take Hammer, her dog, on a walk, but she decided not to take her as she was annoying. Instead, she walked alone where she saw the two girls. She then returned to the house an hour later. She maintained that she had never been out with Elizabeth on her own. When confronted about her diary entries, the interview would take a drastic turn. Alyssa's demeanor had now changed. She was shaking and quivering. However, she still didn't tell the truth right away. Alyssa now changed her story. She said the pair had been playing out in the forest. Elizabeth had fallen, hit her head, and then died instantly. Now panicked, she had tried to conceal the body by burning it. Given the final page in her diary, detectives knew that this wasn't true. However, this was the start of the truth coming to light. Detectives simply had to keep chipping away and poking holes in her stories. The final entry in her diary that had been scribbled over had now been completely uncovered, and it read as follows: "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throats and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing." As soon as you get over the "oh my god, I can't do this" feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky right now though. Okay, gotta go to church now. LOL. This entry had been written on the same day that Elizabeth had gone missing, October the 21st. When confronted with the diary entry, everything started to unravel. They showed Alyssa her final journal entry. They asked her if Elizabeth's throat had been cut. She said yes, and Karen, Alyssa's grandmother, burst into tears and walked out the room. Alyssa told police that she told her sister to go over and ask Elizabeth to play. Once Elizabeth was lured out of her house, Alyssa told Emma to go home. Alyssa told Elizabeth that she had something to show her, but it would be about a 15-minute walk into the woods. Alyssa was already armed with a kitchen knife while she was holding the hand of 9-year-old Elizabeth. The two girls arrived at a shallow grave. Alyssa had actually dug this hole 5 days before. This was premeditated. She had been planning this for quite some time. Alyssa began throttling Elizabeth. She then grabbed the sharp implement, jabbing at her a total of 7 times in the chest. Alyssa then dragged this same sharp implement across Elizabeth's neck. She then buried Elizabeth and covered her with leaves. Police knew that to be able to find Elizabeth's body, they would need Alyssa to guide them to her. Of course, she knew exactly where Elizabeth was. Alyssa agreed to take police to her remains. She lay just 15 minutes from home, and her body wasn't exactly buried very deep. Some of her body parts were protruding from underneath the leaves. The search for Elizabeth Alton had come to a devastating end. A day after Elizabeth was found, police announced that they had placed the 15-year-old under arrest. Alyssa had been charged with first-degree murder. Police also interviewed Alyssa's boyfriend and asked him to undertake a polygraph test. Although they suspected he likely knew that something had happened, they determined that he didn't have anything to do with the murder of Elizabeth. He wasn't implicated any further. Alyssa had dug 2 graves in the weeks before. She was essentially waiting for the perfect opportunity. It remains undetermined who, if anyone, the second grave was intended for. But police suspected she was actually planning to kill her 2 younger brothers.
Well, by opening the November hearing, the judge will allow the general public to attend the trial as well as keep the suspect in custody. At that certification hearing, Judge Beadham will decide whether to try the 15-year-old suspect as a juvenile or an adult.
Despite her lawyer's efforts to get her a lesser charge on the grounds of a troubled childhood and her age, the judge ruled that Alyssa would be tried as an adult. Alyssa pleaded not guilty and trial preparation got underway. In June 2011, a huge blow came for Elizabeth's family and the prosecution. Alyssa's defense team requested that her lengthy confession should be thrown out. The judge ruled that because of her age and the line of questioning put forward, at least part of her statement would not be admissible in court. Her trial was delayed and set for early 2012. Knowing they were up against it, the prosecution decided to offer Alyssa the option of a plea deal. Therefore, Alyssa withdrew her not guilty plea and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. This spared her the chances of receiving the death penalty. As part of the deal, Alyssa had to recount what had happened that day in all its awful detail. The tension in the courtroom was palpable and everybody was sitting in stunned silence. The defense team heavily relied on Alyssa's childhood, upbringing and mental health issues. They claimed that her prescribed medication made her more prone to violence. Despite this, Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder and 30 years for armed criminal action. Under Missouri's law, Alyssa may seek parole after 30 years. Alyssa appealed her sentence in 2014, but it was denied.
What, does your sister still have the knife?
Yeah.
And what is going on there?
I don't know, I just woke up.
Okay, who am I talking to now?
Her daughter.
Okay, and what's going on there? Who has the knife?
My sister.
Okay, does she still have it?
Mom? Okay. What happened?
Born on May 2nd, 1971 in Reynoldsburg, Lisa Knaefel was a 41-year-old resident of Willoughby Hills, Ohio. She worked as a social worker for the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services, and she had lived in Lake County for 12 years. She had been married to her second husband, Kevin Knaefel, a truck driver, for 6 years. In 2006, she married Kevin Knaefel and lived with him in Willoughby Hills, Ohio, with her daughter Megan Zanella from her previous marriage. Willoughby Hills is an average city in Ohio situated near to the southern shore of Lake Erie. In 2009, Lisa would give birth to her second daughter, Haley Knaefel, growing the household to 4 people. According to friends and family, she was described as a caring woman who loved to spend time with her children and enjoyed camping. In 2011, the family grew again when Sabrina Zunich was placed into foster care with Lisa and Kevin. Sabrina was 16 at the time and settled in with the family easily, owing largely to the stability the Knaefel family were able to provide. Sabrina Zunich was born on October 27th, 1994 in Cleveland, Ohio to Susan Edwards and Mark Zunich. Unfortunately, Sabrina's parents struggled with illicit substances and alcohol addiction and were in and out of prison for most of Sabrina's childhood. At age 4, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, and she reportedly struggled with anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. She was raised primarily by her grandmother whilst attending Wycliffe High School, where she frequently engaged in fistfights. At the age of 14, Sabrina was moved into the Emma Cayley Receiving Home in Lake County, Ohio. There she would spend 2 years in and out of foster care until finally placed with the Knaefels in July of 2011. Initially, 16-year-old Sabrina fit in well with the Knaefels, and her grades reportedly improved during the time that she lived with them. However, she soon grew to resent her foster mother as she believed Lisa would give preferential treatment to her biological daughters. During this time, Sabrina grew closer to her foster father, Kevin, and she reported that their relationship evolved into a far more intimate one sometime in March of 2012. According to Sabrina, it began with simple massages, but over the fall and summer of 2012, these acts became more intimate and graphic, allegedly occurring on a very frequent basis. When Sabrina began attending Willoughby South High School, Kevin would drive her to school each morning. It was during this time they would often engage in intimate acts. As Sabrina and Kevin grew closer, the relationship between Lisa and Kevin began to become more tense. They would fight more and more often as the year of 2012 progressed. Friends of Kevin Knaefel stated that at this time he was considering divorcing Lisa. On May 16th, 2012, Kevin took out a $250,000 life insurance policy on his wife, Lisa. This was one of many such policies that added up to nearly $800,000 in total payout were Lisa to pass away suddenly. Throughout this period of turmoil within the Knaefel family, Kevin allegedly began sending text messages to Sabrina. They indicated that he hated Lisa and they could build a family together once she was gone. Lisa was not blind to the relationship between Kevin and Sabrina, however, and became increasingly suspicious. It was alleged that at one point, Lisa told Sabrina she needed to move out of the Knaefel home by January 1st, 2013. During this time, it was also alleged that Sabrina began acting out at home and even threatened 13-year-old Megan with a sharp implement. On the morning of November 15th, 2012, Kevin drove Sabrina to school. After they parked, Kevin began crying, telling Sabrina about a fight he had with Lisa the previous night. According to Sabrina, he told her that he would hurt himself if Lisa didn't pass away soon. Sabrina also stated that she felt afraid for Kevin because she had fallen in love with him. She promised that she would end Lisa's life within 24 hours. In the early hours of November 16th, Sabrina donned a ski mask and took a large serrated sharp implement into her foster mother's bedroom before attacking her. At around 1 a.m, Megan was awoken by the sound of dogs barking and a commotion coming from Lisa's bedroom. She investigated, finding Sabrina in a ski mask attacking her mother with the weapon. Over an unknown period of time, she inflicted as many as 178 injuries, 2 of which were deemed to be fatal. She attempted to fight Sabrina off. Megan reported that at one point she was on top of Sabrina before being shoved aside. It was then that she called the police at approximately 1:15 a.m.
What's an emergency? You need to get off the radio, Julius. What is going on? Who has the knife?
My sister.
What, does your sister still have the knife?
Yeah.
And what is going on there?
I don't know. I just woke up.
Okay, who am I talking to now?
Her daughter.
Okay, and what's going on there? Who has the knife?
My sister.
Okay, does she still have it?
Mom? Okay? What happened? I don't know.
Is someone hurt?
She's still stabbing my mom.
She stabbed your mom?
Yeah.
Is she breathing at all? Yeah, she can hear her. Where's your sister at? Why, I got everyone please say, honey, where is your sister?
When police arrived, they found Sabrina covered in Lisa's vital fluids, still holding the sharp object she'd used to end her foster mother's life, now bent from the ferocity of the assault. She was immediately taken into custody, although responding officers stated Sabrina had suffered wounds of her own and appeared to be in shock. During a search of the house, Lisa's 3-year-old daughter Haley was found hiding in the bedroom closet. Kevin was driving a route in Michigan when police called him to inform them that his wife had passed. Kevin asked if his daughters were okay, and he was informed he would be able to pick them up at the local police station in Willoughby Hills. He arrived at 5 a.m. that morning to pick up his daughters. Officers that interviewed or interacted with Kevin in the immediate aftermath of the event described him as relatively calm, and indicated that he seemed to be more curious about the crime than he was distressed. Furthermore, authorities alleged Kevin became angered when he was told he would not be able to see Sabrina while she was in custody.
Yeah, you remember me, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you recall?
Yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Getting done with my homework? Going, I don't know, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bed.
And we're at home?
Mm-hmm.
What, anything unusual happen?
I don't know.
How do you get along with Kevin?
Kevin's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's more the one that helps me out.
Mm-hmm.
Because this has Megan to deal with, and so we made agreements a long time ago that if I need anything, that I can go to Kevin.
How about with Lisa? How are you feeling with her?
Me and Lisa have never been the best. She's never seemed to like me, and she's been wanting me out of the house.
What's your thoughts on how Lisa is not alive now?
What?
Oh, you had a knife. You stabbed Lisa.
I did.
You did. And Megan called the police.
That can't be true.
Bree, it is. I'm sorry.
Lisa's really dead?
Lisa's dead. Sorry.
I don't think nobody else is hurt.
Nobody else was hurt. Thank goodness.
The forensic pathologist that conducted the autopsy, Dr. Phalo, would later describe some of the wounds as complex, meaning that either the knife or Lisa had twisted after being jabbed. Dr. Phalo also stated that one of Lisa's fingers and one of her thumbs had nearly been completely severed. Multiple defensive injuries were present, indicating Lisa had been awake at the time of the attack and had bravely attempted to fight back. Unfortunately, Sabrina was able to jab Lisa deep enough around her jaw to sever her carotid artery, and likewise deep enough through Lisa's chest to collapse the lung beneath. Dr. Falo described the cause of death as multiple wounds, at least 178 in total of the head and neck, torso and extremities, with musculoskeletal, vascular and visceral injuries. For the first 6 months of the investigation, authorities believed Sabrina had committed the crime alone, or of her own volition. It wasn't until August 2013, after believing Kevin had abandoned her, that Sabrina reached out to investigators to arrange a plea deal. It was then that she told investigators about her relationship with Kevin and his wishes to end Lisa. Following Lisa's passing, Kevin had claimed nearly $800,000 in life insurance payouts and had begun to spend that money in a number of ways. He paid off his house, purchased a new home in Florida, put down payments on new cars, and purchased flying lessons. Very subtle, Kevin. Just a note from me, these insurance scams just blow my mind. Always so eager to get the money and so brazen with spending it. You just know he was going to buy his own light aircraft in the very near future. According to investigators, Kevin had contacted Lisa's place of work immediately following her death, inquiring about what kind of paperwork he would need to fill out in order to claim her life insurance. In October 2012, Sabrina had reached out to a friend, Autumn Pavlik, asking if she knew anyone who could end her foster mother's life for her. Autumn testified that Sabrina had told her Kevin and Lisa were planning on divorcing, but said that Lisa was worth more dead than alive. Investigators also found that Kevin had contacted Sabrina's social worker, asking if he would retain custody of Sabrina should he choose to divorce Lisa. Further investigation revealed Kevin's deeper connection to the crime. Allegedly, Kevin wished for Lisa to be ended as he feared he would lose custody of his 3-year-old daughter if he were to divorce Lisa. Sabrina alleged that, as part of his manipulation, Kevin told her they would raise his daughter together once Lisa was ended. Sabrina admitted that Kevin had coached her in how to commit the crime, stating that Kevin had instructed her to twist a knife to make the scene appear like a burglary gone wrong. She also stated that Kevin had advised her to plead insanity or self-defense should she be caught. Whilst no physical correspondence was uncovered to support this, investigators were able to pull phone records between Kevin and Sabrina's phones. They found nearly 1,500 calls or texts had been exchanged between the 1st and 15th of November 2012, with 78 of those occurring between 7:12 p.m. November the 15th and 12:48 a.m. November the 16th, just half an hour before Megan would call 911.
How you going? Ron Palmer. And then you told me you wanted to talk about his wife's work.
Correct.
That's the subject matter?
Yes.
So,
Kevin, do you know anything that was happening at the house the night before you left for work that night?
well, hang on a second. We just talking about his wife's work. What's going on at the house the night before is not his wife's work.
Okay. Where does your wife work at?
With County Children's Services.
Were you and Lisa in the process of going through a divorce?
Okay, now we're getting outside the scope.
Kevin was the first to go on trial, convicted of 6 counts of battery. This was for his relationship with Sabrina, 3 counts of complicity to commit an aggravated murder, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder. Sabrina was asked to testify during his trial and brought forward her allegations surrounding their relationship, Kevin's grooming of Sabrina, and his planning and coaching of the crime. Kevin's defense attorneys claimed that, since there was no physical evidence directly corroborating Sabrina's testimony, he should be declared not guilty. The defense further went on to claim that Sabrina's testimony could not be trusted because she cooperated with the investigators only to lower her own sentence. Despite this, a jury found Kevin guilty of all 11 counts after only 9 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to life in prison on August 6, 2014, eligible for parole after 30 years. The 6 battery charges for his relationship with Sabrina added 12 years to his life sentence. After Kevin's trial, Sabrina was then convicted of aggravated murder. She pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison on September 29, 2014, eligible for parole after 30 years. During the trial, Sabrina expressed a great deal of remorse, appealing to the judge and jury for forgiveness. "I want to say how sorry I am for all those I hurt. Lisa did not deserve what happened to her. I ask forgiveness to be given to me, not for my benefit, but for those who need the healing process to begin. I can't explain how much remorse I have and how much sadness I deal with." The judge agreed that Sabrina had been manipulated and used by Kevin, but stated her crime was far beyond a simple case of manipulation, and that she had only been granted parole because of her cooperation with investigators in August the previous year. Sabrina is now 27 as of February 2023 and is still serving her sentence in a Dayton Correctional Institution. She will be eligible for parole in 2042 when she will be 47 years old. Kevin is 52 as of February 2023 and is serving his sentence at the Lake Erie Correctional Institution. He will be eligible for parole in 2055 when he will be 86 years old. Lisa Knaefel was buried on November 20th, 2012 at the Davis Babcock Funeral Home in Willoughby. Her service was attended by friends and family. The family encouraged contributions to the Royal Family Kids Camp in lieu of bringing flowers to her service. Newborn babies, the most precious, the most innocent thing on the planet. The very thought of anyone even wishing something ill upon something so beautiful is so abhorrent and so inhuman that it's almost unfathomable. But sadly, some dark souls out there won't just have these thoughts. They will bring them into reality. They will take action and do the unthinkable. This is the full and detailed case of Lucy Letby. Our story begins in the heart of Cheshire, England. There, the Countess of Chester Hospital has stood for centuries. From humble beginnings as a dispensary for the needy in the 1800s, it has grown into a vital institution offering a wide range of medical services. At the core of the hospital's mission is a commitment to serving the community. From maternity care to specialised units in cardiology, oncology and more. The hospital also stands as a hub for medical research and education, fostering collaboration with universities as well as medical schools. More specifically to this story, the neonatal unit is a sanctuary for the tiniest of patients, where the delicate cries of newborns can be heard throughout each day. It is a place of both vulnerability and resilience, a place where the dedication of healthcare professionals provide the best care possible. Chester in Cheshire, England is a city that is infested with history and charm. It can be dated back to the Roman times. It is the city where many excited families give birth to beautiful newborn children, but the pictures painted here aren't always beautiful. In Nursery 1, often referred to as the Hot Room, the Countess of Chester Hospital's dedicated staff faced many challenging circumstances. In November of 2013, Victoria and Michael Whitfield welcomed their precious daughter Felicity into the world at just 34 weeks. In those early days, the Whitfields placed their trust in the caring hands of Lucy Letby, a nurse that had recently begun working on the unit. Lucy was described as a sweet, innocent nurse, one that the Whitfields were happy to have taken care of their newborn bundle of joy. On November 20th, Lucy sat beside baby Felicity, and then the peaceful atmosphere was shattered. The sound of alarms pierced the air, and Lucy sprang into action. She pressed the emergency button to call for reinforcements, doing what she could to restore the baby's health. As the medical team rushed into the room, they worked tirelessly to save Felicity's life with intense focus, a life which had suddenly taken a dark turn. Felicity's lungs had collapsed. She was holding on to life by a single thread. The medical team was able to fully intubate and stabilize the new baby, but questions still remained about what exactly had caused such a drastic change. This would be the first of many suspicious occurrences at the Countess of Chester Hospital. The next 2 years would remain relatively quiet in the neonatal unit, at least as far as unexplained complications were concerned. However, on June 8, 2015, that all would change. Baby A, one of a pair of twins, began displaying signs of distress, an all too common occurrence in a place where newborn babies are closely monitored. While baby A's mother was concerned about the distress, the nurse in charge had told her not to worry as she monitored his progress. But within 26 minutes, that same nurse recognized the gravity of the situation. They urgently called for a doctor to intervene. The baby's stats were tanking and it wasn't looking good. Among the chaos, the baby's mother anxiously awaited for news on her child's fate, watching as doctors crowded around her baby. The nurse tried to reassure the mother in a calming manner, offering words of comfort in the most difficult of moments. However, the situation took a somber turn as the urgency escalated. Before the clock struck 9 on that night, baby A's struggle came to a heartbreaking end, leaving medical professionals to grapple with an unexplained loss. In the aftermath, the nurse extended a gentle gesture to the grieving parents, offering to bathe and dress the baby, giving them intimate time with him before he was taken to the mortuary. In the wake of baby A's tragic loss, the entire neonatal unit endured intense emotional strain, and just 28 hours later, the unthinkable happened. Baby B, baby A's twin sister, suddenly collapsed. A sense of urgency filled the air once more as another emergency situation unfolded. In those tense moments, baby B was successfully resuscitated, saved from the same fate as her twin brother. While relief washed over the team and the parents, questions still swirled as to what exactly had gone wrong. They performed testing to try and discern exactly what had happened, finding that baby B had loops of gas-filled bowels, indicating that a bowel obstruction had caused the collapse. This was not a cause for immediate concern. Baby B was monitored closely as she eventually gained health, and she was eventually discharged with her still grieving parents. On June 14, 2015, baby C made its entrance into the world. He was born 10 weeks before his due date. His arrival was met with cautious optimism, requiring no immediate medical attention and seemingly in good health. Despite this good news, the fact that he was premature landed him in the neonatal unit. The staff in this unit closely monitored baby C's progress, and all seemed well until another grim turn took place. In the midst of the challenge to save his life, a nurse's hushed words to baby C's mother carried the weight of the world. She said, "He's going." Despite everyone's efforts, baby C's condition just couldn't be repaired. He passed away within a day of his birth, leaving another unexplained crisis on the books. Baby D was brought into the world 6 days later as a full-term infant. However, she found herself in a neonatal unit since the mother's water had broken early. Medical professionals had given her a clean bill of health but kept her in for observation. However, as the early hours of her life unfolded, baby D endured a series of unexplained crises. Throughout the course of 2 horrifying hours, baby D coded time and time again. Nurses noted that she had skin discoloration each time they had to rush to her aid. Baby D would suffer yet another collapse just 34 minutes later. This sadly ended her life before it could even truly begin. Now, after 4 unexplained emergency situations in just 1 month, the head of the neonatal department, Dr. Breary, took notice of the strange occurrences. He conducted a meticulous review of baby D's case, as well as the 3 previous unexplained incidents. However, no definitive conclusions arose from the investigation, leaving only further questions about what was happening at the hospital. Babies E and F were born 10 weeks premature. They resided in a neonatal unit under the care of a medical team. On August 3, 2015, their mother visited the unit, milk bottles in hand, but her discovery left her concerned. She noticed that baby E had a red liquid around his mouth. She called out to the nurse nearby to check on him. The nurse quickly calmed her nerves, saying it was simply a result of tube irritation in baby E's stomach. The twins' mother was calmed, but tensions only grew as a doctor visited on his rounds the next morning. Upon inspection of baby E, the doctor had noticed the same thing. They found fresh red fluid coming up baby E's tube. From outside the unit, baby E's mother heard the familiar sound of her own child's horrendous crying. She rushed to find her baby in distress as resuscitation attempts were being made. But despite their best efforts, baby E was the fourth baby that had lost his life suddenly and without reason. Less than 24 hours later, baby F crashed as well, leaving the hopeless mother in a state of utter despair. Luckily, though, baby F was able to be restored to full health, but this left behind another suspicion that could no longer be ignored. It was at this point that nurses became suspicious of these occurrences. Further testing showed abnormal levels of insulin in baby F's system. This could not be explained away easily. The nurses began to suspect that someone had overdosed the infant with insulin. This must have caused a myriad of complications from the extreme levels. By October, 3 more infants had passed away unexpectedly. Something had to be done. Nurses, doctors, and even Dr. Berry went to their supervisors and consultants to beg for some kind of investigation from upper management, but their cries were muffled by words that claimed they were making a fuss. Even though some kind of investigation was promised, it wouldn't take place until February of 2016. Dr. Berry had waited too long. He knew he had to take action. After ordering a thematic review to the now extremely high toll of lost lives, he found one common factor that existed among every single unexplained occurrence. One nurse that had been on staff during every single collapse. This nurse's connection to mortalities and scares were met with confirmation from doctors and nurses that were uncomfortable with working with her. Suspicion within the unit had already been growing about her behaviour. Dr. Berry called a meeting to discuss his findings. The findings were sent to the medical director of the hospital, Ian Harvey. Dr. Berry begged for an emergency meeting to take action, but no such meeting would occur for 3 more months. During this 3-month period, 2 more babies experienced life-threatening circumstances that could not otherwise be explained. They were found with either air or extreme amounts of insulin within their system. This couldn't be an accident. These actions were clearly intentional. Other nurses and doctors were refusing to work with this one nurse, the nurse that was becoming increasingly more suspicious. Taking action to the best of their ability, the nurse of interest was no longer allowed to work on night shifts. She was banned until the confusion was settled. On May the 11th, Dr. Berry would finally get his urgent meeting with Harvey and Alison Kelly, Kelly being the director of nursing. It was during this meeting that Berry would spout his complaints, his concerns and alarms about the nurse who everyone was now afraid of, with seemingly nothing being done to stop the huge spike in child mortality rates. However, the only response that was received was an assurance letter from the NHS Trust. This is the organisational unit in charge of that hospital. According to this letter, there was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that a nurse was causing this huge mortality rate. They put it down to purely coincidence. With nowhere to turn, doctors and nurses in the neonatal unit were forced to return to work, knowing that every day would be riddled with anxiety over the next child's collapse. By June of 2016, directly after another strange crisis, the nurse in question had taken a vacation to Ibiza. Everyone was now able to settle and breathe, at least for a little while. During this 2-week vacation, no emergent situations occurred within the neonatal unit. But on June the 23rd, the nurse had returned. This was just in time for another life on the neonatal unit to end. Child O was a perfectly healthy baby. He was due to be discharged to his parents. As had always occurred, he collapsed unexpectedly, leaving shocked and distraught parents behind. 13 minutes later, baby O's triplet brother met the exact same fate. This was the final straw. It had to end here. Too many lives had been lost. Doctors and nurses were tired of standing by and doing nothing, of receiving no help from above. Upon investigation, it was found that baby O had an injury to his liver. Air had been injected into his bloodstream. This, once more, was no accident. Someone had deliberately done this to this poor, innocent soul. Dr. Brery urgently called Karen Reese. She was the duty executive of the hospital, telling her what had just happened and demanding that the vicious nurse be removed from the unit. Reese, instead of finally launching an investigation, simply said that the nurse was safe to work and that she herself would take the responsibility for any further situations. Dr. Brery was met with more disappointment, knowing that this wouldn't be the end. He decided to remove the nurse from the unit anyway, placing her on clerical duties in the wake of inaction. Again, the mortality rate had slowed and the strange collapses ceased. 3 months of peace would preside over the neonatal unit until in September of 2016, the hospital would receive a letter of grievance from Lucy Letby, the nurse that had formerly worked on the neonatal unit, before suddenly being forced to work in a clerical position. The letter detailed the unprofessional behaviour and attitude that she had received from other doctors and nurses on staff, saying that she was constantly bullied for months. In response to this letter, all doctors and nurses were forced to write a letter of apology to Lucy. After writing the letter of apology, another cry for an investigation rang out towards the NHS Trust. An investigation that did happen and took 2 months to complete. The Trust found in November of 2016 that nothing out of the ordinary was occurring in the neonatal unit. Every path had been exhausted and there was nowhere left to turn. Maybe they had just been wrong. Maybe Lucy Letby was just the sweet, fun-loving and bubbly nurse that everyone else said that she was. If that was the case, what else could have been causing such crushing chaos? Nurses and doctors combed through every option they could think of. Viruses, contaminations, anything they could grab onto to explain the horror that had been happening. They tried as hard as they could to come up with an alternative explanation. But no such explanation could be found. It had to be harm inflicted at the hands of a nurse. And that nurse had to be Lucy Letby. A year would pass until in May of 2017, police were finally called in to investigate the carnage in the neonatal unit at the hospital after the staggering mortality rates were finally seen on paper. After considering the option of naturally occurring reasons, it was more likely that the lost lives were the result of deliberate harm. And it didn't take long for police to point to a prime suspect. With just the coincidence of her shifts alone, Lucy Letby was arrested.
Hello, Lucy, is it?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Chester, please. Look, it's Stefan, 2 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else? Oh, can you take the yeah, not a problem.
be in the back seat over here.
Hold on, Mom, to
Yes.
get the seat up.
Okay, just take a seat in there for me, Lucy. I'll move that seat forward a bit shortly.
Yeah, I've just had knee surgery. So.
Oh, right, okay.
Her initial interview would yield nothing. Lucy insisted that everything that happened was out of her control. She said that the whole neonatal team wondered together what may be occurring.
They told me that there would be a lot more deaths and that I'd been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
However, this did not deter investigators. This only prompted them to investigate for physical evidence instead of a confession. Searches of Lucy's home as well as her parents' home provided the staggering evidence that they needed. Lucy had strangely been hoarding patient records. This was along with multiple handwritten notes about her thoughts and experiences. Among these notes were the words, "I am evil. I did this." In Lucy's bedroom, over 200 handover sheets were discovered in shopping bags. Sheets which detailed the depressing ends and emergent situations of the babies in the neonatal unit. Police continued to search, turning next to Lucy's computer. Investigation into her search history found that Lucy had searched for 11 of the affected families on Facebook. Additionally, searches on her smartphone discovered a photo of a sympathy card, one that was sent to one of the families. The card was signed with Lucy's name. The police would spend the next year combing through the thousands of pages of reports and interviews, finally gathering enough evidence to charge Lucy Letby with her heinous crimes. In November of 2020, all the evidence pointed to one fact: Lucy Letby was responsible for ending these infants' lives. A supporting role of this evidence included the text messages that Lucy would send in correlation with each lost life. She would bask in the sympathy she received as the unsuccessful hero in these infants' lives. She would say things like, "It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Hard coming in tonight and seeing the parents." She would continue to garner the sympathy of her friends over each chaotic emergency, detailing each loss and complication. It was clear that Lucy had no remorse for what she had done. Years after these numerous incidents, families were forced to grapple with the fact that they did not lose their children due to natural circumstances, and that nothing had been done to stop it happening again. As news broke that these infants had passed away at the hands of a nurse, the powers in Westminster released a statement saying they would be launching an independent inquiry to investigate the inaction of the NHS Trust. Families look back on her interactions with Lucy, with one mother realising that she had witnessed one of Lucy Letby's attacks. Despite not being his designated nurse, Baby C's mother had seen Lucy standing over her son's monitor. This was just moments before the emergency alarm sounded. Lucy Letby had been injecting that baby with air. And she had been injecting air and insulin into the IV bags and the intubation tubes of every single baby, leading them all to either extreme health complications or to the end of their lives. Additionally, it was found that Lucy had injected some of the infants multiple times after their lives didn't end, with parents discovering the true horrors that the children had gone through at her hands. All of this and more would be revealed at her trial in October of 2022. There, every detail of her crimes would be aired out by witness statements. Lucy faced the weight of 22 charges. She pled not guilty to each and every one. The most compelling evidence that the prosecution would produce was the handwritten notes found inside of Lucy's home. The notes containing the troubling confessions of her evil nature and the fact that "She did it" was difficult for the defense to combat. However, what was also present were notes declaring her innocence, leaving the question of her guilt extremely unclear. What proved to be truly haunting were the witness statements. Expert witness Dr. Dewey Evans took the stand, testifying to the harrowing instance involving child G. He revealed that under Lucy's care, the baby had received far more milk than prescribed, one that couldn't be anything other than a deliberate act, one with intent to harm. As the courtroom drama continued, another startling statement came to light from Lisa Walker, a co-worker of Lucy's. According to her testimony, not only had Lucy Letby neglected to help when one of the infants was in distress, but had also chastised another worker for lending a hand. Lucy's squeaky clean, nice Lucy facade was beginning to crumble. As witness testimonies continued, Lucy's supervisor detailed the odd behaviour that she exhibited during her time on the unit. She would spend excessive time with babies that were not assigned to her care, with doctors witnessing her watch the oxygen levels drop and do nothing. Co-workers detailed how Lucy would neglect her own assigned infants in order to latch onto other infants in the unit, other infants which would later have health complications. As the trial progressed, the jury was shown Lucy's diary, in which she had written the initials of each of the babies who had passed away or that had experienced serious emergencies. The amount of time that officers spent gathering the evidence proved to be useful as Lucy's act was being destroyed. May of 2023 would mark a pivotal moment in the trial as Lucy took the stand in her own defense. With a voice full of emotion, she made the declaration that she had only ever done her best to care for the infants, saying that she was there to take care of them, not to harm them. As her questioning continued, Lucy introduced an unexpected claim. She said that the tragic occurrences were the result of plumbing issues within the hospital, and that nurses were neglecting to wash their hands. This was something that the prosecution hadn't prepared for. They scrambled to continue their fight to prove Lucy's guilt. Nick Johnson, lead prosecutor, had succinctly summarised what the jury was meant to do. It was their duty to weigh the evidence presented, deciding whether Lucy was truly guilty of her crimes, of injecting air and insulin over 22 times into various infants, ones that otherwise would have had the very real promise of life. As the jury deliberated for 22 days to match her 22 charges, the legal teams of both sides considered what the outcome may be. While Lucy did have an overwhelming evidence against her, some of the 22 charges included multiple attempts against the same baby, but attempts that ultimately resulted in their survival. Would the entire trial be thrown out over any of these charges? Ultimately, Lucy Letby was found guilty of 14 of the 22 charges. She was found guilty of ending the lives of 7 infants and attempting to end the life of 7 more. Lucy refused to leave her prison cell for the sentencing hearing, apparently unable to bear the shame of the families of which she had destroyed. It was during this hearing in August of 2023 that the judge would equate Lucy's acts to sadism.
This was a cruel, calculated, and cynical campaign of child murder involving the smallest and most vulnerable of children, knowing that your actions were causing significant physical suffering and would cause untold mental suffering. You created situations so that collapses or causes of collapses would not be obvious or associated with you. You removed and retained confidential records of events relating to your crimes and checked up on bereaved parents. There was a deep malevolence bordering on sadism in your actions. During the course of this trial, you have coldly denied any responsibility for your wrongdoing and sought to attribute some fault to others. You have no remorse. There are no mitigating factors. In their totality, the offences of murder and attempted murder were of exceptionally high seriousness, and just punishment, according to law, requires a whole life order. Lucy Letby, on each of the 7 offences of murder and the 7 offences of attempted murder, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. Because the seriousness of your offences is exceptionally high, I direct that the early release provisions do not apply. The order of the court, therefore, is a whole life order on each and every offence, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
Lucy became the 4th woman in English history to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lucy is currently working to appeal this sentence, hoping to see the outside world once more. On the other side of justice, Nick Johnson announced that his team would be retrying Lucy on just one of the accusations, one story involving a baby girl in February of 2016, a trial that will not take place until June of 2024. Nick Johnson will not be able to retry this case until after Lucy appeals the original conviction. In the meantime, the attention of many is turning to the NHS Trust, the organisation in charge of the hospital. Healthcare workers who had worked alongside Lucy have come forward to shed light on a troubling workplace environment. They have recounted experiences of a hostile atmosphere for those who had tried to raise concerns about Lucy and her crimes early on, and the pervasive fear of a destroyed reputation that swept it under the rug. Throughout Lucy's trial, several paediatricians who worked alongside her had repeatedly voiced their concerns about her behaviour, only being met with resistance on the part of management. Dr. John Gibbs, a member of the department, disclosed that paediatricians were definitely concerned that Lucy had been harming neonatal patients, but responses to these concerns would take months upon months to arrive. Many of the families, staff and public firmly believe that if the hospital's management had taken appropriate action, that many lives could have been saved. Dr. Jayaram, a doctor that had raised concerns about Lucy Letby in October of 2015, stating that the truth needs to come out about why no action was taken to protect the innocent lives within the hospital. Additionally, the delayed involvement of the police is an even more concerning factor, highlighting a systemic issue within the NHS. Issues that could perhaps stem from the systemic underfunding of the NHS, the overworking of NHS caregivers, of unfathomable bureaucracy, of needless middle management, and the funneling of taxpayer money away from actual healthcare and into private entities and donors' pockets. Altogether, this contributes to a lower level of care, arguably by design. Dewey Evans, the expert witness for the prosecution, among many others, strongly believes that there should be a police investigation into the hospital executives who consistently ignored the claims against Lucy. Lawyer Tamlin Bolton is representing the families of several babies who were the victims of Lucy Letby, making civil claims against the trust in charge of the hospital. Bolton emphasised that the importance of scrutinising what the trust knew about the situation must to be uncovered for proper justice to be served, highlighting the compliance they hold in the tragedies that occurred. While the British government did launch an independent inquiry into the trust, many representatives of the victims' families have argued that this isn't enough. Letters have been sent to the revolving door of health secretaries, demanding the government to establish a statutory inquiry, an inquiry which would compel individuals involved to provide evidence, as opposed to the independent inquiry which allows for them to opt out of providing evidence. Rob Behrens, the man who is leading the fight against the trust, has stressed that this moment is pivotal in the history of the health service, underscoring the need to understand why patient safety isn't given as much importance as the reputation of the management teams. The call for a more comprehensive investigation and the protection of those who raise concerns is a significant step towards addressing systemic issues in the healthcare system and in gaining true justice for the families involved that endure such heartache.
One of my employees did not show up for work this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
Which is totally uncharacteristic of her. She and her boyfriend are splitting up, and he can be a real jerk with her.
This is one of the most shocking cases I have ever investigated. It involves things that no person or animal should ever witness or experience. A truly difficult course of events to break down and present to you. This is the tragic case of Tina Herman, Cody and Sarah Maynard, and Stephanie Sprang. Tina Herman, a mother of two, Cody Maynard and Sarah Maynard, was born on February the 13th, 1978. Tina's biggest joy in life was being a mother. She appreciated the simple things in life. Her favourite flowers were sunflowers, and she would collect figurines of dolphins. Daughter Sarah was born in April 1997, and son Cody was born on September the 16th, 1999. Both were good in school and participated in multiple athletic and sports teams. Cody Maynard was described as having an enormous heart. If he was to notice bullying, he would put a stop to it. Sarah Maynard was described as the epitome of bravery and an inspiration. Tina was by this time divorced from her children's father, Larry Maynard. At that time, he was living in New Jersey with his new wife Tracy and their son, AJ. After moving, Tina Herman quickly became best friends with another mother in the neighborhood, Stephanie Sprang. The pair became inseparable. Stephanie was also a mother of three. She had a bubbly personality and was always smiling. The most important thing to Stephanie too was her children. They lived in a county of Mount Vernon called Knox County. At the time, it was known mainly for its agriculture. It is surrounded by parks and lakes, and its residents are known to be friendly people. It has a population of over 16,000 with a tight-knit community feel. It is located around an hour's drive from Columbus, the capital of Ohio. On the morning of Wednesday, November the 10th, 2010, Greg left the house for work at around 3:40 a.m. that morning. He was working at the Target distribution center outside of Columbus. This was around an hour-long drive away from the family home. Greg wasn't planning to return home for a few days. He had plans to stay at a friend's house nearer to work and play some golf and hang out. Back at the house, Tina Herman, now aged 32, was getting her kids Cody, aged 11, and Stephanie, aged 13, ready for school. Cody and Sarah left for school and attended their classes at East Knox Middle School. After the kids had left for school, Tina left the house before 9 a.m. to run some errands. Boyfriend Greg had sent Tina a text message when he left for work, and he received a reply at around 11:30 a.m. Tina explained in the text message that she had fed the family dog, a miniature pinscher called Tanner. Tina had a scheduled shift at work at 4 p.m. at the Dairy Queen in Mount Vernon. She got on well with her co-workers and had a good attendance record. She was not one to just not turn up. She had also planned to meet with her neighbour and best friend Stephanie. They were going to house hunt for a new home for Tina's family to move into. Between the time that she sent the text message to boyfriend Greg and the time she was due to start work at Dairy Queen, Tina had her whole day planned out. The home where the family lived was fairly isolated, with few neighbours living in the area. When Tina returned to the family home after going to the store, she discovered that she was not alone. Shortly after entering the house, she was struck in the head in an attempt to knock her out. This attempt failed. In an escalation, she was then struck multiple times in the chest and back with a sharp implement by an unknown man in the master bedroom. Coincidentally, during the attack, neighbour and best friend Stephanie entered the family home. Stephanie rushed to the master bedroom to check out the loud noises that she could hear. After seeing her best friend being viciously attacked, a distraught Stephanie started to yell. She too was attacked by the assailant in the same way as Tina. The attacker struck her in the chest repeatedly with a sharp implement until she was no longer breathing. After both women were tragically lifeless, the intruder began dismantling their bodies in the bathtub of the family home. The beloved family pet Tanner was present throughout the event. He would not stop barking as he saw his entire world being torn apart. The man then shockingly ended the life of Tanner in much the same way. The barking could have been drawing attention to the scene. The attacker then put the bodies of all three into trash bags. He then attempted to clean up some of the mess in the house. During this time, Cody and Sarah had returned home from school on the school bus, taken a short walk home and then entered through the front door. As soon as they entered the house, the assailant jumped at the startled children. He struck 11-year-old Cody in the back of the head with a sharp implement, sadly ending him in an instant. Although Cody had already passed, the crazed assailant then continued to strike him. After witnessing the unbelievably harrowing attack on her brother, Sarah took this chance and fled to her bedroom in an attempt to escape. However, she was unable to flee from the living nightmare that had become her reality. She was chased and caught by the man. By then, he had already taken 4 precious lives, but for dark reasons, the man decided to spare the now shattered life of Sarah. He tied her up with a cord from the fan in her bedroom. He then carried her downstairs to the kitchen where he gagged her and left her to wait. He returned to the horror in the bathroom, disposing of Cody in the same heartless manner as before. With 3 people now packed into black plastic bags, the man carried them out to the garage. Here, Stephanie's Jeep was parked. He loaded the bags into the boot of her car. He then returned to the family's kitchen to blindfold Sarah and placed her in the car with the bags. Just a note from me, I find this just so awful. It's actually impossible to imagine what this experience must have been like for Sarah or for any of them. I guess maybe luckily at this stage, she didn't know the full extent of what had or what was about to happen. It's just really, really awful. The man drove Stephanie's Jeep around a mile away from the house. At this stage, he changed to his own car, a Toyota Yaris. During this time, Sarah was unaware that the lives of her loved ones were now over, and they were now in the bags placed beside her. The man transferred Sarah and the bags into his own car and then drove Sarah to his home. Upon arrival at his house, he locked Sarah in the bathroom. He then left for a period of time and disposed of the bags at a site far away from his home. When he returned, he decided he needed a nap. He then tied Sarah to him, fearing that she might escape. Sarah now took a chance to look around. She saw that her kidnapper's home was strangely filled with leaves. The walls were lined with bags stuffed with leaves and the floors were completely covered with loose and bagged leaves. It's hard to imagine just how surreal and confusing this whole thing would be. In yet another heartbreaking moment, when the man woke up, Sarah was intimately violated multiple times. Back at the house and in the community, the absence of the family did not go unnoticed. Later that day, Tina's manager at the Dairy Queen grew concerned. Tina had not turned up for her shift. Not only that, but she had not heard anything from Tina that day at all. This was not normal for her. She called Knox County Police and reported the unusual behavior.
Sheriff Barber's office.
Hi, my name is Valerie Haythorne, and I work out at Dairy Queen. I'm the general manager out there. One of my employees did not show up for work this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which is totally uncharacteristic of her. She's one of my managers. I drove out by her house and went and knocked on the door, left her a note. She's not answering her phone, which is totally uncharacteristic. She's not answering her texts, and she is not at home, but her truck and her coat are in her house. Her truck's there and her coat is in the house. I'm very concerned about her.
What's her name?
Her name is Tina Herman, Herrmann.
Okay.
I know that she and her boyfriend are splitting up, and he can be a real jerk with her.
Okay. Do you have a phone number for her?
Oh God, I do, but it's in my phone. I'd have to call you back.
Okay, that's fine. What was your name again?
My name is Valerie Haythorne.
Okay. Okay, I will have a deputy swing out there and check on her.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right. Bye.
Following up on the report, the police arrived at Tina's home twice to check on her. They visited once at 8 PM and again at 11 PM. However, there was no answer and they noticed nothing unusual. At this stage, there were no grounds to enter the home. Tina's lack of contact was something that the manager just couldn't ignore. She drove to Tina's home herself the next day on Thursday, November the 11th. She wanted to get to the bottom of this growing mystery. The first thing she noticed was that Tina's car was not in the garage, and when she looked into a window of the home, she noticed that something was not right. In a decision not taken lightly, she broke a back window accessible from the yard and entered into a nightmarish scene. She discovered an excessive amount of spatter around the house. She searched through the home in an attempt to find some answers. While in the bathroom, she came across a bizarre marking in the bathtub. It was a rim of a red substance around 2 inches high in the tub. She immediately called the police again and told them what she had found.
This is Deputy Sylvia. Can I help you?
Yes, this is Valerie Haythorne. I called in last night about Tina Herman being missing. I am out at her house now. I just went in her home because I'm so worried about her. There is blood everywhere.
Okay. Where are you at? I'm sorry. I just got back today, so.
Okay.
So you just need to kind of fill me in a little bit, okay?
Tina Herman works for me. She did not show up for work yesterday, and we have not been able to locate her or her children for the last 24 hours now. I just spoke with...
No, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Okay.
I just need an address.
481 Kings Beach Drive in Apple Valley.
Okay. Just give us a few minutes and we'll be en route, okay?
Okay,
don't go back in the house.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye.
After gaining approval from Tina Herman's boyfriend Greg, the police entered the family's home. The deputy sheriff noticed the family pet, Tanner, was not at home. Whilst trying to unearth answers as to where the family could be, the deputy noticed a man sat in a car across the street from the house. He asked the man what he was doing there and to see his license. The man told him that he was waiting for his girlfriend named Sarah. Not knowing what to make of it, the deputy let the man go. However, he did make a note of this strange encounter. A manhunt was immediately called for as the police continued to investigate the Herman family's home. They located Tina's pickup truck, which was found 7 miles away from her home near Kenyon College. Police called Tina's boyfriend Greg in for questioning. Greg was at work during the time of the disappearances, and afterwards he went to buy beer at a nearby store and then went golfing, just as he said he would do before the incident. He was captured on CCTV and it was clear that he was not the suspect that they were looking for. Greg was quickly released as he had a solid alibi. Police had found a Walmart bag which contained heavy-duty black bags and a tarp at the family home during the search. They checked the product codes on the items, and after matching these to store records, they were able to verify the date and time that they had been purchased. Police officials then identified the man who had purchased these items by checking the surveillance video at the store. In the CCTV footage, they were also able to see this new suspect driving his Toyota Yaris when leaving. After checking records for people who owned a Toyota Yaris in the area, they finally found their suspect. It was a man named Matthew Hoffman. 30-year-old Matthew Hoffman was once a tree surgeon. Police obtained a search warrant for Matthew Hoffman's Columbus Road home on November the 14th. Quickly after accessing the house, they found Sarah Maynard tied up and gagged in his basement, still alive.
Under the circumstances, a 13-year-old girl being held captive for 4 days by a total stranger, I would call her the epitome of bravery.
While the police continued to search for the missing family members, Matthew Hoffman was arrested for kidnapping on the 15th of November.
Everybody's, worried about what's going on. Everybody's scared, wanting to know, is everybody okay? And everybody's just worried, mainly. There's a lot of thoughts running through my mind, and I guess all we can do is pray that they come home safe to everybody.
For neighbors who live near Hoffman, the news that 13-year-old Sarah was found just steps away is disturbing.
It's really scary knowing that I could spit on his porch from my house. He's just weird. He doesn't go to the grocery store. He's very paranoid. I know that. He only had 2 friends in 1 year that I've seen come over there.
He was fun and stuff at first, and then recently he choked my friend, and that's when she told me not to let the kids over in the yard, and this was like a month ago.
Hey, Matt.
I'm Roger Brown. I'm a detective here at the sheriff's office. Okay? Okay, you want to take your hat and stuff off? Coat? All right with you? If I take them cuffs off and put them in the front, is that going to be a problem? All right, let's do that then.
Go ahead and stand up here for me. Turn around here and just face the wall for me. You kind of understand what's going on here, Matt?
That's it. We can explain all this to you if you want to talk to me, okay? I think you know what we want to talk about, but we need to find some people. Matt, can you hear me? The only reason that I don't know where Tina, Stephanie, and Cody are is because we had to spend a lot of time at the scene. Okay? We will know. We will find them. And if it's going to come to it that it's not with your help, then so be it. But I'm going to be the first guy to tell the jury that. I guarantee you. That I sat in an interview room with this guy, and all he wanted to do is close his eyes and blink them until I walk out of the room. And then he opens his eyes and gets his drink of water. Now, am I a prudent person? What kind of person do I think that is? You know, other people, there's family members out there of other people, and all they want is closure. That's all they want. They've been up for days like you and I have, you know? I don't understand sign language, man. Is that your heart? You're saying heart? Broken. Your heart's broken? Because of what happened? No? Someone broke your heart?
I don't want to hurt anyone. It's not me. You know what antipsychotic medication is? I mean, it doesn't... I read about it. It doesn't directly address the problem. It's just powerful. It tranquilizers. Take it if I have to. I don't want to be a teacher. I think I'm crazy.
Why do you think that?
Because I must have done something bad. I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
Wow, that can be worked through.
Okay, potentially, I can't, guarantee these things. What facility you might go to, where you might go, what might happen, and the attitude that the people in the system are going to take toward you can be affected by the fact that you decided at this point to do the right thing. From the moment we broke into your house, found you and found her in the basement, you owned it all. You own it all. Okay, you can't do anything about the part of it you own. And if you didn't have a plan and you just put them in the Jeep and you just pulled over somewhere, there's weeds in the Jeep, so it looks like you probably pulled into a field somewhere and that's how the weeds got on there. If it's a random place, give me an idea where street it might be on or off of. But you gotta be able to narrow the field down from the whole county. And the dumping itself has to be less traumatic to recall than all the stuff that went on in the bathroom. Just tell us where to look. And I will stand up in court and say that you did. And I will go to Sarah myself and tell her that you did. Okay. I don't want you to get upset, but the reason we're driving around, and we don't have to drive around. Okay, remember I came in here saying that I didn't want to drive around unless there was some value in it. Okay. Right. That's the whole point, is will you see something that will, prompt your memory? But I want to talk about what the possibilities would be for that location. Okay? In other words, not across the street. You're not going to put bodies across the street. What would you do, from there? In terms of a place you might go.
Matt, we're not going to be mad at you if you don't know exactly. Your memory is not exact because you have said that you want to know. You're afraid to find out, but there's a part of you that wants to know. if it doesn't happen genuinely, then it doesn't happen. I'm not going to be upset.
Drive you, let you see and kind of see what happens. I mean, I may ask you, or Chris may ask you an occasional question, but that's all. That's all we're trying to do. Okay?
What do you need, drinks, right?
Sure.
Or water? Do you like water better?
Can we take a water too?
Yeah. All right, do you want to go to the bathroom before we go? Are you good?
I think I should go.
Okay. I'm going to walk down with me.
Hoffman appeared on a video arraignment on the 16th of November and was given a public defender. The judge ordered for him to be held under a $1 million bond. On November the 17th, after several days of searching for the missing family, the sheriff announced his concerns that the 3 missing people had most likely had their lives cut short. However, they continued their search to find them, holding on to hope. Matthew Hoffman, in a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty and with one very strange stipulation, finally gave the police, family and community the answers that they were looking for. He informed them that the bodies of the family could be found in a hollowed out tree in the Kokosing wildlife area. It is highly unlikely that the police would have ever found the bodies without having Hoffman tell them. The hollowed out opening of the tree stood around 35 feet into the air. The strange stipulation requested by Hoffman was that the tree must not be cut down. During his trial, it was mentioned that he had a noticeable interest in trees, perhaps an obsession. Hoffman also proved to be an unreliable witness. His admissions regarding his treatment of Sarah during her time of captivity were conflicting to the statements of Sarah and other evidence. He stated that he tried to make her comfortable, fed her, and treated her with respect and dignity. However, these were simply lies. During the trial, Sarah bravely stood up to her kidnapper, the very same man who had catastrophically taken the lives of her family and friend.
The judge listened and her relatives wept as the prosecutor read a letter the young girl wrote to her attacker.
All I was thinking about is if my family was okay and if I was going to be able to live. Especially when he was putting the ropes on me, I said, ow, that hurts. He said, I don't care if your arms and legs turn purple. Justice will never be served. I will never be able to get my mom and brother back until I see them in heaven. Matthew, I want you to know that you will never be forgiven by me. But I'm not scared of you, Matthew. I'm going to stand up for myself and live my life.
Hoffman never looked up, not once, as more family members spoke.
Before you rot in hell, as you be treated and tortured as you have done our family members.
Before the judge sentenced Hoffman to life in prison without parole, his attorney spoke for his client, who again never looked up.
This was a random burglary that went terribly, terribly wrong. It's tragic. Can't undo what is done. We apologize.
This was my daughter here, this Stephanie. I'm trying to remember the things that were and bring them into the future with us, but it's hard. It's very hard.
Hoffman tried to spin a web of lies that the crime was a burglary gone wrong. Hoffman had already spent 8 years in jail after burning down a condo that he burglarized in 2001. During the trial, Hoffman said, I did not enter the house to kill those people. I did not know a single one of them. I did not know their names and I did not know who lived at the house. I chose the house to break into because there were not any close neighbours, and I noticed the garage door was ajar. However, all evidence led to a different agenda. Hoffman, who had a previous criminal record of burglary, arson and theft, had purchased the sharp implement days before the attack. Hoffman had already spent 8 years in jail after burning down a condo that he burglarized in 2001. It was also brought to light that he had camped in a wood nearby the family's home the night before the attacks. In his confession, Hoffman told investigators that he did not take anything from the family home. Additionally, he stated that he had used black bags that he had found within the home. However, this is known to not be true. The bags were in fact the thing that identified him. When a deputy found the man waiting near the family home in his car, in a sickening twist, Hoffman was the man that said he was waiting for his girlfriend named Sarah. However, Hoffman was actually there because he planned to burn down the family home, destroying all evidence. Hoffman had already spent 8 years in jail after burning down a condo that he burglarized in 2001. On January the 6th, 2011, Hoffman pled guilty to 10 counts and was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. This case is almost too senseless and too sad to mention. There are now over 100 cases on my channel, and I am never not disappointed and horrified with human nature. All I can say in comfort is that there are more good people out there than bad. So as you watch my channel, always remember that reassuring fact. Lily Sullivan was born in Pembroke in Wales. She grew up in Llanelli, a small market town in Carmarthenshire. There she lived with her mother, Anna. Lily was an only child, and her mother understandably doted on her. After a tragic 14 miscarriages, Anna had finally given birth to a healthy baby girl. She had all but given up hope until, that is, Lily came along and gave her real purpose to her life. Lily was a beautiful girl, inside and out. However, she couldn't always see that for herself. Growing up, she lacked self-confidence. She was an amazing artist and kind to everyone, but she was shy. This made it hard for her to find where she was meant to fit in high school. However, by her late teens, she had found her place. She had started college and she was truly thriving. Yes, she was quiet, but she was also quick-witted, a wise old head on young shoulders. She wasn't one for following the crowd either, but she had made new friends and was enjoying the independence that college was bringing her. She had just gotten her first tattoo, a spider in the middle of her chest with ivy leaves going over her shoulder. Really coming into her own, she had just started driving lessons and loved her part-time job at a supermarket. Her life was really just beginning. It was 2021 when Lily turned 18. In the UK, this opened up a world of socialising opportunities for her. She now spent her Friday evenings in the local pub, going on to dancing into the early hours of Sunday mornings with her friends in clubs. This was a different world, and for a girl that loved house music, she was now truly in her element. On December the 16th, Lily was heading to a Christmas night at Out, a nightclub formerly known as Paddles in Pembroke. At around 7:30 p.m, Mother Anna had dropped Lily and her friend Lara at the Castle pub for pre-drinks. The girls were understandably excited to let their hair down, and everyone was in the festive spirit. Lily's mother drove away from the pub, wondering what stories of shenanigans the pair would come home with. She normally wouldn't have to wait too long. The plan was for Mum Anna to pick up Lily and her friend at the end of the evening, and the friend was then going to come for a sleepover. However, this plan never came to fruition. Lily and her friend stayed at the Castle pub for around an hour, before meeting 5 other friends and then walking to Out. Once inside, they got more drinks, and then took photos by the flower wall. No one could have anticipated that these would be the last photos as a group. The club was packed out. It was the festive season after all. A few hours later, Lara asked Lily if her mum was coming to get them. She wasn't feeling great and didn't want to stay out, but Lily was having a great time. She had met someone whilst in the club, 31-year-old Lewis Haynes, who was also out with his friends for the night. Lewis was a well-known cricket player in the area, one who liked to party and celebrate his wins. Tonight though, he wasn't celebrating a win. Instead, he'd fought with his girlfriend and was trying to drink it off. And now it seemed that his girlfriend was the last thing on his mind. Throughout the night, Lewis was showing Lily a lot of attention. He was buying her drink after drink and showering her with compliments. His friends had warned them that Lily was only 18, but he ignored them and continued to focus his attention. The pair were spotted kissing in the corner of the club, seemingly in their own little bubble. At around 1 a.m, Lara started to have a panic attack outside of the club. She wasn't sure how it started, but she did have them often, so this was a relatively normal occurrence. Amidst the panic attack, there was a scuffle happening in the background. Lewis's female friend was shouting at him and Lily. She said, "What are you doing? She's only 18. She continued, "You have a girlfriend and a baby at home." And then Lily walked off with Lewis, and that was the last time that Lara ever saw her best friend. At 2:47 a.m, Mother Anna was parked at a nearby garage waiting to pick up Lily and Lara. She phoned Lily and told her to get a move on. Lily told her that she was on her way and would be with her in just a couple of minutes. The phone call then ended abruptly. Mother Anna tried calling back, but there was no answer. This was unusual. Lily never hung up on her mum, but Anna could maybe put this down to just a drop in signal. She was coming from a club after all. Leaving a club is often a pretty hectic scene, if I remember correctly. While Anna was waiting for Lily, she phoned her friend Lara, but she said that Lily was no longer with her, and that she herself was staying with her grandparents. Anna attempted to call her daughter 30 more times, but each time the call went to voicemail. We can only imagine the panic rising within her. At around 3:10 a.m, Anna noticed a man walking by, acting suspiciously. He was shaking his head and then holding his head in his hands. Anna decided to follow the path that he was taking. She was just curious, but soon she lost sight of him. He lost her as he headed down towards a wooded area. Anna had no idea at that moment that the person she had been watching was the very same man who had just murdered her daughter only moments before. She began driving around the local area to search for Lily, but she eventually went home. She lived in hope that her daughter had gone to stay at a friend's house. She did, however, continue to send text messages to Lily's phone, praying that when she did wake up, there would be an apologetic reply and a really good explanation. But, as we know, this sadly would never come. In the early hours of the morning, Lewis Haynes returned to the home he shared with his girlfriend. He was crying hysterically and kept repeating, "Take me to my mum, I need to speak to my mum." On the way there, he confessed to killing someone. He said, "I've strangled somebody, they're in Mill Pond. I've been in Mill Pond." Lewis told his parents how he had met Lily at the nightclub and told them what he had done. Lewis's dad then drove to the pond, where sadly he found Lily. At around 4 a.m. on December the 17th, the police were called to the Mill Pond area after receiving a call from Lewis's dad. He told them that a female body had been found in the water. She was found with her cream-laced top removed. It was found next to her in the water. Her brown leather jacket and her phone were found in the alley nearby. The police and the ambulance service arrived. But despite their resuscitation attempts, Lily was already gone. When police attended Lewis's home, he told them, "I strangled her." He was arrested for murder and taken to the police station. He then frustratingly gave a no-comment police interview, but he later gave a statement. In this statement, he said he had met Lily for the first time on that night. He said that he couldn't recall Lily's age ever being mentioned, but he remembered his friend saying that he had a daughter and a partner at home. He explained that the pair had sat on a wall chatting after they left the club. They then kissed, and Lily had suggested that they go back to his house. He explained that it wasn't possible as he had a girlfriend. He then alleges that Lily said he would tell his girlfriend that he had violated her. He said that he tried to walk away, but she was hitting his back and saying she was going to ruin his life, saying that his daughter would now be ashamed of him. He said he lost it and grabbed Lily's neck and threw her sideways. This caused her to go into Mill Pond. He said he tried to lift her out, but by that time she was a dead weight. He thought that she was now dead, so he went home. Lewis Haynes was charged with Lily Sullivan's death on December the 20th. In May 2022, Lewis Haynes pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and he was due to stand trial for murder on June the 20th. However, he changed his plea to guilty on the charge of murder on the 13th of June. This was due to the overwhelming evidence against him. During his trial, Lewis had admitted to strangling, but insisted that the attack was not carnally motivated. He also stated that he had gone into the pond to try and save Lily. But the prosecution argued differently. There was bruising to Lily's left eye, her cheek, lower jaw, and upper neck. There was reddening near her collarbone. Her left arm was scratched and her right arm was bruised. There was also tiny spots of bleeding under the skin. These were consistent with manual strangulation. He hadn't just grabbed her neck and thrown her into the pond. This was an altogether different kind of attack. And the judge agreed. Before sentencing Lewis, he said, "I'm sure a degree of intimacy occurred in the alley. I'm equally sure it did not progress to sexual intercourse or anything close to it. I'm sure that did not happen as Lily did not want that to happen. There was no indication of distress, but a clear indication she was now coming to meet her mother." That phone call ended abruptly. She did not want the intimacy between her and Lewis Haynes to go as far as intercourse. I am sure from the evidence that Lily did not remove her top voluntarily to be naked in the middle of the night in December. I am sure Mr. Haynes took it off her. His account of her threatening to tell people what he had done with her does, in fact, have an element based in truth. I find she did say she would complain, not that he had actually her because he had not, but because he had tried to force himself upon her against her will. The court heard that Lewis had a great deal to lose because he was in a relationship and he was going through family court proceedings to have access to his child. He felt threatened that Lily could impact the outcome, and so he wanted to silence her. The judge said he throttled Lily to prevent her from telling people that he had tried to get her to go further than she was willing. His intention was to silence her. He didn't want anyone to know what had happened in the alley. The judge then stated, "You brutally murdered Lily Sullivan because you wanted intercourse. You strangled her face to face. She must have been terrified. An 18-year-old girl alone in the dark with a powerful man, entirely at your mercy. And you showed her absolutely none. You were only concerned about your self-preservation." He sentenced Haynes to 23 years before he will be eligible for parole, a sentence that falls short of Lily's mother. Anna called Lewis pure evil. She said that she would never forgive him for what he's done. She stated, "Overwhelmingly, I feel it's all so senseless. It didn't need to happen. What I can't come to terms with is that the man who killed Lily knew I was waiting for her and passed me by the garage. He chose not to help. He did nothing which I can't forgive." Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? What do you think could be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.